This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot? Now you're talking.
And Ken Whitehurst in the third chair.
Apparently you can forget the score.
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listeners.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at the speed of a tiny mouse riding high on an unarmored starling. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon. This time around, we're talking about Roland Steiner, Duncan Allen, David Blood, Jesse Steinfort, and Scott Percuda. I'm Keegley McNardigan, your host. Today, our panelists are Russ, rock-loving mouse Wakelin, and lawyer, musical maven, and now 6 mil war game designer extraordinaire, Ken Wabangi Mouse Whitehurst. Let's begin. Issue number 1. The British Dictionary defines poly as a combining word or prefix from ancient Greek and meaning many. Okay, that makes sense. We all know about polyhedral dice, right? Polynomials, yep. Polyglots, well, maybe not a lot of us know that one. Polymaths, well, that one's impressive. Basically, though, it's all about the many. For instance, a game that uses many different miniatures from many different manufacturers to make many different types of awesome. Question. In the 2004 film Along Came Polly, in what play does former child star Sandy Lyle decide he will take on both leading roles? Red Hot and Blue Russ.
Pippi Longstocking.
King and I Ken.
Can I just say that the first time I've ever been on television?
That's incorrect, and this is not television. Jesus Christ Superstar Philip Seymour Hoffman declares he will play the roles of both Jesus and Judas. Sadly, he is not a polymath, and things don't go well. Issue number 2. Many of us are polycinemaphiles. I just made that one up.
Ooh.
But you get the idea. We like movies, but in the best movies, long after the images fade, the music stays with us. We love listening to those soundtracks over and over again, and if we have a friend who can keep us current, movie soundtracks can give us fabulous musical backdrops for all kinds of gaming, whether or not we remember the score. Question. According to Rolling Stone, so not really our primary audience, what is the best movie soundtrack of all time? I got nothing, Russ.
Anything with John Williams.
Do the can.
Pulp Fiction?
Well, interestingly enough, Russ pretty much abdicated this question from the outset. Ken, your answer did arrive in the top 20. Sadly, it was not the top number 1 slot. I'm not sure what kind of gaming you'd do with this, but it's Help by the Beatles.
Oh.
I don't get it.
All right, fair.
Yeah.
Issue number 3. Mice are cute little critters that factor into all manner of stories and tales, no pun intended. No matter how nasty little critters are in real life and how much money you can stand to lose if they start to show up in your house, we tend to ignore all that when they don little suits of clothes, hop onto a saddled bird, ready to do battle against the forces of evil. I mean, rats. Question. How many toes does the average mouse have? Rat-a-mouse Russ.
4.
Crow Marmot Ken.
16?
Ken, once again, he's so close, which sadly just the fingertips clutching and still leave you in the wrong category. 18. How could you guys not know that? I've checked. The mice on Mice and Mystics and Tailfeathers, they're anatomically correct. No, I didn't check. Issue number 4. Anthropomorphic characters are a special subgenre of animal characters that are basically animals that act as if they were human, though they may exhibit stereotypes of their species' behavior. Some of the best, most iconic children's literature features anthropomorphic characters, either wholly or in part. Question. In the 1908 classic tale The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame, what is the name of the incurable adventurer who never counted the cost, who almost loses his ancestral home for a used automobile? The Sea Rat Russ.
I can't remember his name. Darn it, I know the movie, though.
Caroling Field Mice Ken.
Don Quixote.
That's totally made up and not real at all. J. Thaddeus Toad Esquire.
Oh, yes.
And no, Mr. Toad would not have been acceptable, which
Mr.
is as
Toad's
close as
Wild
either of you
Ride.
were going to get. So forget it. That's it for now. Thanks for listening and good night.
This episode of the D6 generation is brought to you by
Battle Foam, protecting your army so you don't have to.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hey, and welcome to episode 185, Craig.
185 says it all.
Of the D6 generation. I'm
That's
Russ
us.
Wakeland.
I'm Craig Gallant.
And I'm Ken Whitehurst, and I can't believe I've listened to all 184 episodes prior to this.
Ken,
Right.
we're so excited to have you on the show. For those who have...
Back on the show.
Yes, back on the show in the third chair. Now, this is your first time in a third chair, right, Ken?
It is, yes.
It is but Ken has been on the show before as a contributor of the early and well-beloved, I should say, segment, The Score.
Clearly beloved.
Yes, very well beloved.
So beloved that I stopped doing it like 100 episodes ago.
You did, but people
That's my fault.
ask for it all the time. They're like, is Ken going to come back and do the score? Because we miss. So Ken, for those who don't, are not, that brutal to themselves and have listened to that many episodes of the D6 generation, Ken's The Score segment, you would go through and you'd pick out a theme for a gaming theme, and then you would find a musical accompaniment for that theme, and you did a really great job at analyzing, playing back, and then sort of bringing it all together in a what was clearly a lot of work.
You were the music guy.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm the music guy, right?
Right.
And that's what I've always been. I'm the guy who DJs our gaming sessions, right?
There you go, the DJ. Is that a thing? Is there like a thing for miniature gamer DJers?
Yeah, it's like a step below bar mitzvahs.
Okay. I do bar mitzvahs and 40K tournaments.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Is it fair to call you the maestro of miniatures?
I'm honored. I'll take
Okay,
that.
good.
the maestro of
maestro of miniatures. Right. Okay, good. All right, well, Ken, so while Ken's here, also pretty exciting, Ken, we'll talk more about this later, but you have a game rule set that you have designed that is now up on Kickstarter called Polyversal, right?
That's correct. Polyversal, the 6mm mass combat science fiction game.
Very exciting.
Living the dream.
Living the Kickstarter awesomeness, which, as we all know now, is a lot of work. So we'll be talking to Ken a little later about all the details on that. And also we'll be diving into a fully featured, fleshed out, well-feathered, if you will, review of Tailfeathers. See how I did that?
Done.
Feathering your cap, I see.
Thank you. Oh, good. See?
The puns
and
are
the feather
flying
puns
fast
keep
and
on
furious.
coming. All right. So before we get to all that, we should talk a little bit about what's coming up in the near future, which is, of course, Adepticon. Right, Craig?
Yes, we should definitely talk about Adepticon.
So, Ken, have you ever been to Adepticon before?
I have not, but I have been to Chicago. Does that count?
It does.
Sort
You're
of.
close.
Sort of.
You've had the food. Now try the con. Is pretty much what you want to do there.
That's right.
So Adepticon is in Chicago. It does take place in the spring, a few short weeks from now, first weekend in April, actually, right,
In
Craig?
fact, a week, when you listen to this, it's probably just about a week away or less.
Yes.
Or, actually, no, it's
More than that,
a little
but getting
more than-
close.
Maybe two, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe two. But getting very close. And, of course, Adepticon is a miniature gaming extravaganza, really. If you are into miniature gaming, you want to go to Adepticon. If you're local to Chicago, get your butt out there. And if you're not local to Chicago, buy a ticket because it's awesome.
Right.
And this year, Craig and I, of course, are going again. We're going to break out some of our favorite miniature games, bring some of our stuff along there. But also, we have now been running for several years in a row the big board gaming night, the final
close
evening.
to 7 years now.
Yes, which is, really, when you think about it, kind of
we're too
absurd.
old. We're too old.
But, yeah, come on by. So what happens is people play in all these crazy tournaments. There's team tournaments, there's painting competitions, and they're all think the whole weekend trying to outsmart and outcraft their opponents. And when Sunday night gets there, you just kind of like ready to chillax. And so we run a giant board gaming event. We have all kinds of different board games to play. Many of them are light and fun, and people just hang out and have a good time. And we play till all hours of the morning until we pretty much pass out, right, Craig?
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It's pretty brutal, but it's awesome fun. And so
Fantastic.
wisely, Craig and I don't do any competitive gaming during the weekend, so we're all frosty. We're ready to go, and we're annoyingly
We're
chipper.
just there for the fun.
We are.
You just store up to beat up on the people who come to play board game night.
Yeah, we try to lure someone into a deeply complex and heavy thinker. So it's actually surprising how many folks go through a weekend of miniature gaming competition and then come to board game night and still kick butt on these really heavy games. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. So looking forward to that. Hope to see you there. Mm-hmm. Now,
this year or some future year.
Yes, please plan for Adepticon. It's awesome.
Planning it now is, maybe a little hard.
It'd be tricky unless you're local. Yeah, I would think so. Now, also, we happen to now. Ken really gets around because Ken, you're from Virginia Beach area, Washington D.C.
Yep, that's right, Virginia Beach.
Yeah. So down that area, but somehow, I was hanging out in Dunkin' Donuts the other night with Craig, and there was Ken.
I know it was cold up there
Popped
too.
in.
Just walked
popped
right in the middle of Dunkin' Donuts, just like he walked off the street. And Ken, do you remember what we talked about at Dunkin' Donuts?
I think we discussed that briefly, the superiority of Krispy Kreme donuts, and of course,
I do not remember it.
Or lack thereof, yes.
well, it was discussed.
It was discussed. There was some discussion.
Discussion was had,
Yes.
and of course, music. I think Craig said at one point, maybe it was after we finished on our way out, but it was like being on a live episode of The Score, all in person.
It was like
Talked about music.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it was a really good. It was an extended part of The Score. So if you've missed The Score, this is definitely a lost chapter you want to listen to because it's basically 30 minutes of The Score, but with all three of us, and Ken really leading us through some of the great soundtracks of recent this past year and around that time. So good stuff there. And Craig, if someone wants to listen to the lost chapters, what's the best way they should do it?
Well, the best way for all involved is really to become a patron over at patreon.com. So you just go over to patreon.com, you look for the D6 Generation, you find our video, you don't watch it because you know what it's going to do already because you've heard me say this a million times. And then you basically become a sponsor of the show for $2 per episode or more, and that will unlock every lost chapter that has ever been.
Exactly right. So
Or
be
will
sure-
ever be.
Yes, it's
Perhaps.
great. Yes, perhaps. So there you have it. So thanks to all of our friends over Patreon. Great service for us there. So Craig, what's the time now for?
Right about now, it's probably time for something along the lines of Achievements in Gaming.
It is indeed a time for Achievements in Gaming. And of course, Achievements is brought to us by all of our great patrons over at Patreon, without whom support this show would not be possible. So, Ken, since you are the guest here today, what have you been playing lately, sir?
Well, so I've been on a trip with my son for the last few days.
Oh, Nate, where'd you go?
My son, he's 11.
Yep.
He is completely. He's obsessed with video games for the large part, but he occasionally wants to play a game. So not too long ago, I picked up a game called Boss Monster. Have you guys seen this?
Oh, yes. Boss Monster is awesome. It's kind of like a video game, card game thing.
Yeah.
Look at you leveraging your son's interests to
Yeah.
trick him into playing real
crafty.
games.
I will stop at nothing, right? So you're always trying, right? And for the first time, it sort of clicked with him. He'll usually humor me with a game, but he's now totally obsessed with Boss Monster. So I, of course, like any father who found a child who will play with him, went and bought everything there is for Boss Monster.
I know. I did the same thing. It's crazy.
And so, like over the last few days, we've probably played like 6 times, and he's now like he wants to run a tournament where every single different boss plays against every other boss.
Nice.
I mean, he's got like a bracket. I mean, he's obsessed with it now. So.
Now, how old is your son?
He's 11.
11. Excellent. Cool. Perfect age for that kind of stuff. Awesome.
Yeah, and it's great. And the pixel stuff. The only awkward moment we've had so far is, Daddy, what's a bordello? Because one of the cards is called Vampire Bordello, but
Yeah.
it's a very seedy hotel. We'll leave it at that.
Right. Right.
Hey, well done.
His mother hasn't seen that card yet, but we'll deal with that when we have to.
That's okay. I should say
so I play a lot with him lately. So we've been playing that. We played chess. King of Tokyo, he likes that also. I got Splendor not too long ago. It's a little Euro. I kept reading about it on BGG and thought, well, it was on sale not too long after Christmas at a local store. And I went, well, let's see what this is about. It's actually a lot of fun. Have you guys played this?
I have played Splendor. Yeah, one of our local gamers, Randy, is a huge Splendor fan. So if anybody will sit down with him near a box of Splendor, he will immediately break out and play.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even figure out really why it's fun, but it is.
Exactly. Yes.
Does that make sense?
The theme is very not Craig. It's not a Craig theme.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not me either. Actually, it's like trading gems, but it really has nothing to do. I mean, it's just like collecting colors, and cards. You need certain combinations to get more cards, and you build. It's like an engine builder, I think is really the right term for it.
Yeah, it's just really a crafty, almost like an abstract game. Really, I mean, it's got a theme on it, but you're really just trying to solve the puzzle, which is a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, so those are the lighter games, and then I read. Well, I guess I should have started with, of course, Polyversal, which I've been testing on my own. But I don't really even consider it playing anymore because it's like refining at this
like
point.
work.
Yeah, it's like work, but it won't be for you. It'll be playing for you, but for me,
Right.
it's work because I've been working.
For the rest of the world, it's fun in a box.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And then I read about Kingdom Death Monster, the Kickstarter.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I missed out on the Kickstarter, and well, I say that I'm not sure I would have backed it anyway because it seemed like a long shot that anyone could create the thing that they were proposing to create. But I picked it up at whatever crazy price. It's better than what it is now, but it was like a pre-order price. And I will tell you, that game is amazing. It's worth it. And I don't say that, I mean, it's a lot of money, but there is so much flavor and depth in that game.
Yeah, we've heard good things locally.
It's really cool. I mean, this guy, the guy who made it, it just went complete. He must be insane. Like, that's all I can think is he's like completely. He's clearly an artist, and so he just went all through this vision, and it's all in there. So it's really well done, and I highly recommend it. Even for solo play, because you really get a lot of flavor in there for a campaign. Cool. So those are the things I've been playing at the moment. And I got Merchant of Venus actually recently too. I'd never played that. I finally picked that up and just played through a game by myself to figure it out.
Well, that's great. And Eric Summerer, thanks you for keeping the dream alive.
Actually, Eric Summerer's enthusiasm is the reason I bought it.
Yeah, how can you not? I mean, if you listen to the Dice Tower at all, it's like you must own Merchant of Venus or you can't be a fan.
It's like one of those games you should have played by now.
Yes,
like if you
right.
haven't.
Right. Great. Craig, what about you? What have you been playing?
What have I been playing? Well, I have been playing Beyond the Gates of Antares against Russ.
Yes.
We finally got back to a one-on-one game after all of those multiplayer games we've been doing.
Yes.
And I'm pleased to say the Concord do better when only one guy is in charge.
I was defeated. It was a tough day for the Gar.
But it was cool because we saw that giant vehicle for the first time. So vehicles are now entering Beyond the Gates of Antares with the super command crawler that Russ has.
Oh, I love that thing. It's so great.
Yeah. It's awesome to look at and very unique among miniature games, I should say. And it was very cool. It was a cool game. And again, it comes down to mission. That game comes down to I was getting bludgeoned. But you got to have the right model in place for the mission. And I was using new models. It was really cool. I used my new Hugh, who was a lot better than I thought he was. Although then later on in the evening, I did see one get mopped up exactly as I feared. But I still think it looks cool. So that was a cool game. I have played The Walking Dead 3 more times since the last time we spoke. So still enjoying that game. Now they before the Kickstarter finished, they put out a whole bunch of new beta equipment and character cards. So now you can pretty much put together almost any combination of character and weapons that you can think of. So I've even tried some sort of military SWAT guys and some other characters from the comics. Played with Reese a couple more times. And then last night I actually played against Dave Farr, the nerd herder Dave Farr. And he played, he took Carl and Rick Grimes, and I took a fully armed and armored soldier with an M16 and body armor and a helmet and the whole 9 yards. And I lost. So, which is probably as it should be. You should not be wandering around the zombie apocalypse firing off an M16 is pretty much what I learned last night. But that was fun. I have played Tailfeathers 3 times in the last 4 or 5 days.
And I'm going to guess the second 2 times had more of the actual rules involved.
They did. There were some rules involved the second 2 times, which was intriguing.
Excellent.
This was the first time I've ever played. Now, Russ is notorious for just going, let's just roll some dice and find out what happens.
Yes.
In fact, that's a Russ quote right there. Let's just roll some dice and the dice will tell the tale. That's Russ's quote.
Yes, they will.
I know the type.
But this is the first time he's ever gone, no, I think you can just do it as many times as you want.
I did, to be fair, I did look. I did
Russ,
it looked like I looked at the book.
It did look like you looked at the book. You sold me until that moment. And even then I was like, okay, I'll roll with it. Like that would be like playing somebody who is playing somebody X-Wing for the first time and going, so what, I use the template once? No, use the template as many times as you want.
Just go wherever you want. It doesn't
There's
matter.
absolutely, the only limit to movement is the turn angle.
It's really
Other
a
than that, you
feel.
can fly across the board in one turn.
You're going for a feel more than any kind of certain depth.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So so that was intriguing. But enjoyable games, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more later on the show.
Yeah.
And then we have finished, my little group has finished Imperial Assault, the Twin Shadows campaign.
Well, that's worth an achievement.
And I have to tell you, I'm starting to sense a pattern with the final battles in these campaigns.
Meaning, what kind of pattern?
meaning that you can go right up to the final battle and be like really close to 50-50. In fact, we were exactly 50-50 on the missions, 50% rebel victories, 50% imperial victories. We got crushed in the final battle to the point where, and Darth Vader showed up, which he didn't have to show up. That was a card that Dave just pulled very early in the campaign and hid from us.
Yeah.
It's like once during the campaign, Darth Vader shows up, and of course he got it in the first
final battle.
And then so he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to save it for the final battle."
Of course you would. Why would you not?
There was no way we were going to survive or succeed. So it was very frustrating. Even Dave was like, by the end, he felt bad. At one point, he had Kane Somos, I think that's his name, the Stormtrooper special character.
Yep, I know
he
him.
had Boba Fett and he had Darth Vader.
Wow.
All on the board at the same time. After we had all been, 3 of the 4 of us were wounded, and all he has to do is wound one more person.
Wow.
And then so it was very frustrating. I don't know what it is. We had a little post-mortem afterwards that so many of the missions seem so cool and balanced, but so far both of the final battles have just been slaughterfest.
Now,
so that was very frustrating.
There's 2 flavors of each final battle, right? Depending on how well were you in the final battle that sort of favored the Imperial?
I don't think the Twin Shadows one does that. The Twin Shadows one is a great way to dive into the system
and have a short
because
campaign.
It's very short campaign. It's like 4 or 5 missions tops.
Right.
And your characters level up very quickly because it wants to give you that flavor.
Right.
So like you're getting more experience per mission than you do in the normal campaign. So your guy's getting more advanced more quickly. I don't think, and I think it's a little more straightforward linear plot line.
Okay.
Than the main thing. Otherwise, I'm not sure because it was exactly 50-50 when we went into that last mission. So that was a little frustrating and disappointing. It was fun to play. It's a great system, and it was a fun group of guys. But I mean, it's a 9-turn mission. In turn 5, we did what we had to do, and then all we had to do was escape, and that's when all those characters showed up between us and the place where we have to escape. And we had really gone out to the wall and kind of extended ourselves as far as we could, as far as taking wounds and filling up on adrenaline. So I'm sure that you get 4 Matrix gamers together with like some fluffy gamer as the overlord. I'm sure they could win. But balance-wise, I think that might... It wasn't like I was going to be writing a strongly worded letter to FFG or anything like that.
Right.
But it was like, it felt like we spent the last battle in kind of a hopeless situation. So that was disappointing. But otherwise, it was a lot of fun. It's a blast seeing Boba Fett show up. It was great seeing all my painted models. I paint so many models for so many games that never see the light of day. So I'm just glad to see all the Imperial Assault models.
Nice. See, there you go.
Yeah, I know.
What about you, Russ?
Well, let's see. Well, I have also been playing a lot of Antares. I've played, I think it's actually, I have 3 here, but I think it was actually 4 games.
Wow.
So our friend Gordon over at Adler Hobby has started a escalation league for Antares.
Yes.
So Craig and I played a game of that when Craig defeated me. I played Sean, who also plays Concord, and I beat him. And this is where my walker first showed up. And
No, it showed up against me first.
Oh, first you, yes. Then it showed up against him. I beat him. Okay. Then I played Colin, I believe his name is. He's the local warlord rep for the New England area here.
They train those to lose their games. You know?
I think so because
exactly.
Now the good news was he was playing Algoran, who I had not fought yet, so I was excited to try to find against a new faction.
Yep.
And people have been asking online what our point values are. So Craig and I are generally playing at 1,000 points.
Yep.
And I played Sean at 1,000 points. Colin only had 750, so I brought 750 out. And it was fun to fight the Algoran. I think he didn't really have the right combination to fight Gar there, or he was just trained to lose or something. But
well, I think I think they're very hardcore 40K players.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think what we saw for the first time was that this game is not 40K.
Yes.
And it does not reward the same kind of behavior and the same kind of thought process that 40K does.
That's true. It's
a far more strategic and tactical game, I think, than 40K.
Yes.
It sounds more like Dust, the Andy Chambers rules, Dust.
Yeah,
it's
it does.
very
Yes.
close. To,
It's much closer to Dust. If you
there's
like
a lot
Dust,
of similarities, actually.
if you like Dust, you will like this game a lot.
I loved that game. Mike Martin and I used to play that when he lived here.
Oh, yeah.
I know. I'm sure he's listening. He's a fan of your show.
Well, then tell him to go buy Antares and meet up with him.
you got your review of it makes me glad.
I think you'll like it. So
Yeah,
get
I'm
this.
gonna-
So Ken, you like this mechanic. So Craig, you like this too. So last night I went back to play Sean again. So the Escalation League, there's a fixed mission each week, right? So last week we were all playing this mission, which is basically grab the objective, run off the table. So last night you rolled a die, and it was one of two missions, and we got this mission where Sean was the defender. So he got to set up basically all the terrain on the board. He got to put 3 objectives anywhere he wanted in his half of the board, and he could deploy half his army anywhere on his half of the board. Okay.
Wow.
The rest of his army went into the, it's going to come from off the table. My army started entirely off the table, but there was one bonus. So also, any unit he had starting on the table could opt to start on ambush. My advantage was we did sonic attacks against every single unit he had. So basically, it was just a special rule for the mission where you rolled a d10, and on a 1 to 3, nothing happened. On a 4 through 9, like you took a pin, and on an 8 through 10 or whatever it was, or something like that, on a higher number, you took 2 pins or something. So basically, there was a chance. Unfortunately, the Gar are terrible with sonic attacks, apparently, and I got no pins on him. So we're starting out, of course, he's got the X launcher, the X howitzer, or maybe it's the cross howitzer. I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to pronounce it, but it's X-howitzer. So he's got one of these things, which is this giant thing. Like if you're standing next to it, it's probably 15 feet tall. It's like this huge thing. And he's got it on the table. It's very scary for most units, but it doesn't really have good armor penetration. So it's not really going to take out my new fancy pants walker tank thing. So I'm coming on the board. I'm getting ready to move at him. But he brought this new ammo, Craig. He brought net ammo for the X launcher.
I'm
So
telling you,
what the
man.
net ammo does is, and you'll like this mechanic, so it's basically shooting netting out, right?
Yeah.
But instead of having some kind of special rules for what happens when a net hits your unit, it just, instead of doing damage, it puts pins on your unit based on the size of the weapon shooting it.
Yep.
So now, what he did was he fires the net at my tank. He can't hurt the tank, but he rolls, it does D6 pins. So the tank takes like 4 pins, just one shot. And now I've got a problem because I really need to stop and clear the netting, because if I don't, so one of the mechanics of the game is, I'm a -1 to hit for every pin on me. So I'm shooting at -4 right now.
Yep.
And by the way, my hit number is 5 or less. So basically I'm only hitting on 1s and D10s at this point. To give the tank an order, I am going to have to make a leadership check, which is a 9, but it's -4. So I got to roll a 5 or less on a D10 just to give the unit an order.
Yep.
And by the way, if I do not, and let's say I give the order and fail, and he shoots me with that howitzer cannon again, he could be another 6 on me. And if I get more than 9 pins on me equal to my command, I'm destroyed.
Yep,
So I really have to stop. And so in my head, I'm thinking the fluff, like there's already this gooey netting all over my thing. And if he hits me one more time, I'm going to be so netted, I'll never get out of it before the battle's over. That's how I'm kind of imagining it. So I have to do the rally order. Right? So the rally order is really cool in the game. It's an unmodified leadership check, and if you succeed, you lose D6 plus 1 pins.
Yep.
And because this is a mod 2 unit, meaning it gets 2 activations a turn, I can rally it and then at least do a little something. So basically, but it was neat to see him have this option where he didn't have a weapon that could damage the tank heavily, but really tie the tank up, which was really neat.
That's another theme in this game, is that you have more than one way to do almost anything.
And the Algorans, which I didn't really see the rep use, but he could have. The Algorans can have grenade launches essentially in every single unit, and they have the net weapon option. So I think what's going to make the Algorans different is they don't throw quite the armor penetrating power the C3 does with their basic weapons, but they could all have these grenade launches and put a lot more pins on you. So it's kind of a different experience if you built your army that way. He didn't, but I think I might go that way if I were to play Algorans.
Right.
So really cool stuff. Fun to see. Sean's a really gracious opponent, very nice guy. Had a blast playing him both those times, having a fun time running the league. So it's great to have a local gaming store willing to run and organize leagues for us. It's really nice. So I'm having a great time with Antares. Also playing more Risk Legacy here. Now, Ken, have you played Risk Legacy before?
No, I've seen it, and it's one of those things like, I mean, unless you tell me it's really good for 2 players, getting a group together consistently to do it is not likely.
It's not really good for 2 players. So how I did this was I actually conned my family into playing it. So
yeah, my wife will never
I have a
play
fixed
that.
group. Now my wife, so Nicole's gone back and forth in this game, and she's starting to really like it. And our last game, so my youngest daughter Kit now has won. Going into the last game, my oldest daughter won the first game. My youngest daughter had won 3 games in a row. So in the first 4 games, the youngest has won 3, oldest has won 1. Nicole and I have won 0. So we're going into this 5th game now. Nicole and I still have a victory point advantage because you haven't won one yet, but you're going into this thing, and some events start to happen that really mess up Kit. So there's these event cards now. Things, I don't want to spoil the game. Things, more and more rules unlock as you play the game. They're hidden in these little packets. You don't open to certain things happen.
Right.
So politics are happening and certain cities are rebelling. All kinds of craziness is going on. So my youngest daughter, kind of due to circumstances beyond her control, is kind of knocked out of a chance of really winning the game.
Ooh,
so, but she doesn't.
Is it rubber banding? Is it like intentionally designed to?
No, we're just discovering there are certain risks. So what it does is
I see what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
almost a legacy of risk.
Almost a legacy of risk. The legacy of risk is still there in riskiness. So what happens is, like, you start to develop these strategies is what happens. Like, there's new mechanics like these cities, and by owning cities, they essentially increase the population, so they count. So if you own a city of value 2, it's like owning 2 more countries beyond the country it's in. So the country you're standing in is now worth 3 when you're counting countries up for troops. So the more cities you own, the higher population. It's like owning more land. So it's really, really great. But as new mechanics come in, sometimes it's not always great to own the city. So if you've developed a pattern of, I'm always going to capture all the cities, you start to discover later that's not always a good thing. And so there's some of these things are surprises as the stories unfold. So that's kind of what happened to her. It's like, oops, now I know I should have had more troops there kind of thing. So this went bad for her, but she got really into the meta, and I discovered a whole new meta game here. So she and Nicole allied up, and she enabled Nicole to win. But the deal was that if Nicole won, she had to include Kit's name of whatever continent she named. so now there's a whole meta game with Legacy Risk where you can get deals by putting on labels for continents, which is awesome. So I think it was brilliant. It was
how
really
old
good.
is Kit?
Kit is 12 now. 12.
Okay, so you have your own budding megalomaniac now.
I do. Yes.
That's awesome.
So it was awesome. So that was so that was a lot of fun, and we all agreed afterwards the game was fantastic. In fact, Nicole really enjoyed it as well. Now she's like, "Hey, we're going on a vacation for a couple weeks in the end of April. Can we bring Risk with us and play it in the evening?" So we're really having a great time with it, and watching the other things unfold has been a blast. So I also think one of the advantages too is I'm definitely guilty of this with my family. So I like so many different games. I'm constantly trying to show them new games. And I think there gets to be a frustration level where they're always learning new rules. And so by trying to play through Risk Legacy to the end, we've played a same game now weekly that we all know the rules cold, and there's no more rules debate or how does that work. We're just right into playing the game and going right to strategy, which is actually going over very, very well. So safety tip there from a
Safety tip.
from a Magpie gamer. Also, I'm playing a lot of mobile games that are board games. So Suro, I'm playing a lot of on my iPhone now. It's a great pass and play game. And also Battlelore on the iPhone is fantastic. And it's also got a pass and play mode, which is great to play too. And then, of course, we'll talk more about Tailfeathers in a bit because I played that with Craig and Reese with some of the rules as well. So Ken, what about modeling? What have you been doing for building and painting stuff?
So, of course, I have a lot of 6mm sci-fi on the table right now for Polyversal. So one of the things we did during the Kickstarter was include a set, like basically the box set has 2 forces in it, but we made an option. People were telling us they wanted more options. So we came up with alternate forces that you can choose to put in your box set. And when we did that, of course, we didn't realize that we didn't have them all painted when we added them. So I've ordered them all from the various manufacturers that we have. And so on my table right now, I've got some walkers from Hawk, some grav tanks. I just
sounds like they're coming up behind you.
You're gonna attack.
Excuse me.
You're gonna get bombed, Ken. Look out.
Can we cut that?
No, are you right next to the airport?
I live near.
I think he lives on the airport.
I live very close to Oceana Naval Air Station, which is the master jet base for the United States Navy here on the East Coast.
So we're seeing. So
those
what
are F-18s you're hearing. In the air.
Oh, cool! Way cooler than like a 737.
So
they're very close to my house.
Do we need to cut that for national security reasons? Is there information going on now that we don't need to know about?
No, I apologize.
No problem.
I guess we're still going.
No, it adds ambiance, Ken. It's adding a military feel to your
You're talking
Polyversal.
about war games,
right? It's perfect.
Oh no, I like it, but I realize it's not good for.
We have a low bar here.
So I'm working on some walkers from Hawk from their PHC line, some grav tanks and infantry and APCs from Brigade across several of their several of their different factions. They have them all divided into factions. We've selected a bunch from different ones. Some Plasma Blast, which is another company in Greece. It's a one-man 6mm sci-fi manufacturer. Has 3 different factions that it's come up with. We're including some APCs from its Marhaf Legion line that are really cool. This guy, his name's Marios. He's like a one-man show. He's sculpting, casting, and selling these 6mm sci-fi things that are really, really nice. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to see those. But if you're into 6mm sci-fi, Plasma Blast, I think, is about as good as it gets.
Cool.
And we're glad to have them on board for Polyversal. And then some Dragonflies from Microworld, which are the flyers you can actually see on the Polyversal. They're in the artwork and some of the demo cards and videos that we've made. I got some more of those to match up ones I had already painted. I finished painting a Majestic Walker, which is Dark Realm Miniatures. It's about the size of a Warlord Titan from... Well, actually, it's probably closer to an Imperator Titan from Epic.
Oh,
if
wow.
you're familiar with that.
Yeah. Right.
Big guy. That was a lot of fun to paint. It's much more like robot looking than it's certainly not dark gothic, but they're really cool and just solid metal miniatures. I forget how nice it is to have just a solid metal, I've got,
right.
You get used to plastic and you remember what it was like when everything was made out of pewter
Right.
or lead, actually.
Lead, right.
Yeah.
Lick your fingers.
Now we're treating ourselves.
Right.
Oh, yeah, it's nice.
It's not a vitamin D deficiency, ladies and gentlemen. It's the decade you started painting miniatures.
That's
right.
Yeah. My madness is
Right.
slowly kicking in from years of painting lead miniatures.
Right.
So I've done that, and then I've gone back and painted some of my old Epic stuff, some Eldar. Actually, I've been it's been sitting around for years. I occasionally pull it out and paint some more of it. So some Eldar stuff. A couple of I painted up a Reaver Titan, an old metal Reaver Titan. That was a lot of fun, actually. I finally finished my Imperator. The Imperator Titan is one of those models I've had for like 20 years. I've been afraid to paint because
Right.
it's
huge.
It's really big and you want it to be really nice. So I find like after 20 years of practice, I decided I was good enough to paint it. I'm still not good enough, but it works for me.
It's a beautiful model.
Yeah, that's one of the great GW models, I think. And then I got Dungeon Saga. Just to change of pace. I'm one of these. I'm like, talk about Magpie. My painting table has got something of everything just spread out all over it, and I kind of go paint half of something and then go to half of something else, and then I'll finish up entire batches all at once. So I've got Dungeon Saga, working on some skeletons and all the furniture and doors and things that came with it. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. And then Zombicide is one of those games. I have collected all of Zombicide and I'm slowly painting. I've finished all of Season 1.
So do you have every Zombicide model made?
Except for all the guest artist boxes, because I figured, I got all the Kickstarter exclusive stuff.
Yep.
And then I figured I could go back and get those on eBay.
So what is your model count for Zombicide? Do you have any idea?
God knows. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds, right?
Wow,
I mean,
right.
I have all 3 seasons, and I lost count, but I did finish Season 1. That was like a huge achievement for me.
Right.
I'm in the middle of painting through Season 2, and then all the extra box. So most of the heroes are painted, and those are just fun to paint. I mean, there's so much detail on those little things. I mean, it kind of surprises me for a board game how much detail Cool Mini or Not gets into their stuff.
Very cool. Yeah, they get a lot. Their miniatures are really high quality for board games. It's really amazing, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they come. I mean, they're obviously mini. They come from that side,
right?
And I was listening to your episode about Blood Rage not too long ago, and I think was it you or Tom Vassell saying that the ones in Blood Rage are like the best minis in a board game ever made.
Yeah, that was Tom, and I agree with him. They're
pretty
really
amazing.
They're really
miniatures.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I believe it. Given where they've come from, I mean, if Zombicide was their first board game project on Kickstarter?
I believe so. I remember seeing it for the first time at Adepticon several years ago now.
And those are really nice. I mean, there's good stuff in there, and it begs to be painted. Like you get it, and you think, it's a board game. I don't need to paint it.
And you open up, and you're like, oh my
So,
god, yep, exactly.
exactly. So painted that. Painted some Kings of War elves. A couple more F-18s coming in the background if you can hear it.
We can.
And sorry, and welcome to my life. I'm losing my hearing, every 30 seconds. some Elves for Kings of War, my local gaming store. I think when Kings of War 2nd came out, they like blew through their inventory of the first edition models. So I picked up some on clearance, and it built this huge Kings of War Elves army in the hopes that someday I'll play the game. And so I'm painting those. I'm not even sure why. And even further down the spectrum of I'm not even sure why is I got Age of Sigmar. And I've been painting the chaos.
Now, what attracted you to Age of Sigmar? The models are amazing. So is it the models?
Yeah, so it was the models. So I will say, I used to like fantasy when I was in high school, which has been 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And 3rd edition came out when I was in college, and I thought it was really cool, but I didn't get into it. Like, I bought the book and I enjoyed reading it, and I thought, well, I'd play this sometime, and I never did. And then I sort of fell off the spectrum. I never touched it after that. And part of why is that getting into it is so intimidating.
Right.
That, you know, for one, so many people are just way into the competitive aspect of it around here that I didn't want to go. I mean, I don't want to drop $1,000 to try to become competitive at a game.
Right.
And so the Age of Sigmar looked like a completely clean slate, and it also looked like it was designed to just be like pick up and play and have fun, and you know, if the points don't matter, and do whatever you want, and that appealed to me. And it is pretty. I mean, it's kind of fun for that. Like, if you don't care, I wasn't invested in the Warhammer world, so it didn't bother me that they just totally rewrote it to be the beginning of the Thor movies. And I mean, I think that's sort of what they're going for. I'm not sure. It's definitely some mythical, nonsense. But it's the minis are really cool. I got it at a good discount, frankly, and I figured it would be fun to take a look at. And if it took off, it took off. And it didn't, I'd have some cool minis I could rebase for something else.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't actually played it yet. I enjoyed reading through it, and I'm just sort of enjoying it. I think Games Workshop, to me at this point, if you read what they say about their company, they say themselves, they're in the business of making models.
Right.
And I think they're really good at that.
They are really good at that.
And so if you just want to have some models to put together and paint, that's sort of where I was coming from with that.
Yeah, they're cool. I mean, they're beautiful. No doubt. The Sigmar stuff is amazing. The models are fantastic. So it's if you're like them, if you're getting them to collect the models, I think you're making a good call.
Right. I mean, that's they're going to go on the shelf. I mean, I realize that I'm not going to play all the games I own. And so,
that is an important step.
Right.
Most
it's the
of us
first
don't
step.
get there.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, you get all excited about, I'm going to use this tank and this thing, and then you realize it's going to spend 90% of its lifespan on a shelf in your room. Mm-hmm. So you may as well enjoy that aspect of it.
Right.
That's
right.
very true. Or just enjoy making it.
Right.
Right.
That's what I've come to. I'm just going to enjoy making this stuff. If it gets gamed with, so much the better.
Right. People used to make models that didn't have games associated with them. That used to be a thing.
That's how I started. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's the stuff I've been working on for modeling.
Nice.
How about you? Are we going to Craig?
Yeah, why not? Craig, what have you been doing?
Go wherever we want.
Right. Nice job, Ken.
Too,
Nice
right?
segue.
Right, you are.
a
Well
host,
done,
too.
sir.
That's
Well
exactly
done.
True. Let's see. What have I been doing? I've still been working on my Antinacetti's habitats from that Kickstarter, from the forward-based Kickstarter. I finished Habitat 2, the medical lab, and I finished Habitat 6, the science lab, which is awesome. It has actually it has isolation chambers inside it and a big, huge bioscanner and a lot. Both of those actually come with a lot of interior scatter, like little medical machines and little medical beds and things like that I've just glued down, and they look really cool. I'm working on my last building now, which is Habitat 10, which is ironically, when I got these, I was still like, oh yeah, Infinity, I'll play that. And Habitat 10 is the objective room from the Infinity tournaments from like 3 years ago. So it's a square room with one door on each side. And then inside, it is the coolest building on the inside because it's a command center. So it has a bunch of places for servers, and it's got a bunch of places for ammo lockers. But then it has communication centers, and it has a giant planetary map plotter and all these things that sadly it's the only one that doesn't come with actual glossy colored screens to cut out and glue into your things. So I'm having to go online and try to find stuff and then kind of size it to fit. So that sort of fell down really disappointingly because it has more screens than any other building in the Kickstarter, but I'm working on that. I think it's going to be cool.
So you're not hand painting the screens?
I did hand paint the screens, but they don't look good compared to all the non-hand painted screens that I have now in there. It's like you open it up, like I'm putting a command table in there that comes with this beautiful glossy color overlay that like it looks like there's like a cool holographic map rising up out of the table. It's really cool. And if I put that in there with my little hand-painted things, it looks just sad. So I painted over my hand-painted things, and now I'm looking for stuff online to steal.
Nice.
In preparation for the Marvel game, which I went in whole hog on the pre-order from, I don't even remember what company, European company makes the Marvel game. Night Miniatures, KNIGHD. I got a bunch of modern MDF terrain pieces from TT Combat over in England, and I wanted to put together one of the smaller ones to see what it was going to like because they're very, very affordable. I think cash wise, I put together the subway entrance. There are more ornate subway entrances out there made out of MDF, but this one costs about $8. And it went together really nicely. It looks really cool. I'm going to paint it up all green, and it's going to look really cool. So I built that. That was really cool. And so now I have I made a big order for our group that everybody kicked in a little money for the terrain. So I've got 2 apartment buildings. I have a whole container ship that I think is going to look very cool with the containers and everything on it. It's like a yard long. And then I have there's a movie theater, and I got a bunch of little extra seats, and I'm going to put like something on the big screen, and so that's going to look cool. So that's my next big project is all that terrain for a more modern feel. And I finished Carl for The Walking Dead for Russ.
Yay, Carl!
I converted a model, and now I have a little boy with a police hat on, and he proceeds to die on a regular basis. But that's me. What about you, Russ?
Well,
I hear you have a big giant model brand new.
Yes. So unlike you guys who have tons and tons of stuff, I have one thing, but it's giant.
It is giant.
I did put together the GAR Command Walker. I got it assembled. I managed to get it primed and dry brushed. And now I'm just starting it's going to be a while because I want to do it's a centerpiece model, right? So it's going to take a little bit of work. But I'm really looking forward to getting some paint on this thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. It's one of my favorite vehicles ever, and this comes from someone who's played a lot of Imperial Guard in the past. So I really like this thing. I did post a picture on Twitter and our Facebook page where I took a bunch of different models from different ranges, and so there's a Space Marine in there. There's some War Machine. There's a War Machine infantry model. There's a War Machine light jack and a War Machine heavy jack, intermixed with the GAR infantry, the GAR suits. And, of course, the giant GAR Command Walker, so you can get a good feel for scale. For those familiar with War Machine, the GAR Walker is probably the GAR suits are about the size of a light Warjack, and the GAR Walker is some of the War Machine heavy jacks are taller slightly than the GAR Walker, but the GAR Walker is much more massive. The base is actually, I would say, 50% bigger in diameter than the large Warjack base for War Machine. And it's just this large piece that clearly holds 3 GAR running around in there, and it's I love it. I'm really pleased with it, so I can't wait to get more paint on it and have it matching the rest of the army. So, and it definitely earned its paint job. It's been doing very well in battle for me so far. Yeah. So,
and it beautifully incorporates the GAR aesthetic into a much bigger model too. It's very cool.
Yeah, I'm loving the look of all the armies. They've been putting pictures up now of some of the newer vehicles coming out for the other factions, and they're very distinct. They're beautiful. I think the only thing in the way from some of the other factions, they don't have plastic, infantry for anything beyond the GAR and the C3. So it'll be good when they get that worked out.
Yeah. But I think they should focus on that, to be honest.
But yeah,
as much as I love all this new stuff,
vehicles are exciting, so we'll see.
They're exciting, and they get gin up interest among those people already invested.
Yes,
you need to get more people. That's how I feel. Locally, we have a bunch of people who are like, "Oh yeah, that's great. Oh, I'm not going to buy an entire army of metal models. I did that back in the IG days, and I won't do it again."
Right.
So
we'll see. But I'm loving it. I'm still having a great time with the game. So, what about other stuff? So, Ken, what have you been doing for vid games, TV shows, books, movies, that kind of thing?
So, enter the rumbling here.
Oh, there it is.
I apologize.
Wow, I hope there isn't some major problem.
I feel like there's some kind of action happening here.
So now you realize why I haven't been podcasting all that much. It's very unpredictable.
You couldn't organize with the Navy?
Yeah, they have this is America, right? So they have a phone number you can call to complain.
And I'm sure it gets all due consideration.
Yeah,
Right.
and some lieutenant picks up the phone and, very politely takes your comments and, they keep right on flying.
That's what happens when they do something bad. It's like, you're going to be on phone duty for a month, Private. What?
Yeah, exactly. So, video game wise, I've been playing. I've been obsessed with Destiny: The Taken King ever since I got my PS4, like in September. I wish that I could stop playing it because it's not helping my life any. But it's a wonderful game. It's very addictive. I've leveled up one character to 40 and 290 some light, and another one I'm working on now is up to like only level 4. So. That's a great game. I mean, if you're on the fence or you're just looking for another shooter, that's a wonderful game. Rocket League, Russ, I know you mentioned it on App of the Ep a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And I already had it, and it good call. That is a great little game.
It is, isn't it? It feels like you start playing it like this is going to be dumb, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's soccer with cars. I mean,
it's like remote control car soccer.
Right. Does it get any dumber than that? But it's awesome.
I think there's some combination of the physics are just right. They're just sort of just plausible enough.
Right.
And then the fact that it always drops something. Like every time you finish a game, you get some new gizmo to put on your car.
That's it. They're giving
I don't think it affects anything. I think it's all purely aesthetic, but it is fun.
I think it's aesthetic too, but there's this feeling you're slightly faster in a fast car. I think it's totally wrong, but I just feel like
psychology.
It's there.
Yeah.
Right. It's a total psychological thing.
So I got Blood Bowl 2 not too long ago.
Yeah.
You know what? I love Blood Bowl. I was the commissioner of the Hampton Roads Blood Bowl League when I was in high school.
There you go.
You know what? It's not a great video game. It's not a bad video game. I mean, let me say, the video game is the perfect video game creation of the board game Blood Bowl.
Yes.
But that's the problem with it.
Right.
It's 2 hours of a board game, fully rendered in 3D with cool, there's commentators and all that stuff, and it's got all the lore and the background and everything. And if you want to play Blood Bowl and you don't have any opponents, it's actually good for that. Mm-hmm. But, nowadays I feel like I want to sit down, and I think games have moved on a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's too bad because I love Blood Bowl, and I think it would be a lot of fun to play. But it is kind of slow. I'm going to let this plane go over.
Airplane, here it goes.
I am so sorry.
Listen to that beautiful engine. So, Ken, can you identify the airplanes from sound alone? Do you have to look out the window?
That's an F-18. I'm not even looking. Yeah. Well, that was a party trick when I was a kid. We had F-14s and A-10s and E-3s. I could identify any of them without looking up.
Nice.
So now it's all F-18s, just about. So Project Car. I've been playing Project Cars. I mean, it's just a hardcore driving simulator.
It's a racer. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It really is. It's a really good one. But the learning curve is basically vertical. It's not easy to learn. So I've just been plugging away at that. I got a McLaren through. I'm a big Formula One fan,
right.
I love driving on the tracks because I watch it so much. Spa-Francorchamps is a Formula One track that has this great turn called Eau Rouge. It goes around this thing and then downhill and then back uphill over this blind hill, full speed. And you see it on TV and you think, well, that just looks like a lot of fun. This is the first video game I've ever played it on where I get how completely impossible it is to do that at nearly 200 miles an hour.
Wow,
blind.
Nice.
It's really exciting. Got Star Wars Battlefront for Christmas. Been playing that.
How you like it?
I summed it up one day on Twitter. Some people said I pretty much nailed it. I think Star Wars Battlefront is like playing Star Wars when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what, I think like those commercials were perfect for it, where the two guys, have you seen the commercial where
Yes.
it's like two guys were like, little kids playing on their bikes, like pretending to be in X-Wings, and then like they grow up and one of them like shows up at his buddy's office in an X-Wing outside the window.
Right.
That's exactly what it's like. It's like playing Star Wars. The problem is, like, as soon as you die, you just respawn and run into the middle of the battle, and then you die again, and it doesn't matter.
Right. It's not very. Yeah. Right. It's just wacky fun. It's not like super tactical or anything.
Right.
I mean, there's a little bit of there's just enough of that to make it interesting, but it seems like no one really cares. Like, it's not like anybody's on their headsets really making serious plans, right?
Doesn't matter at all. The cool thing is it has the sounds. Like, the sound effects are perfect.
It's the sound and the visuals, and I mean, I love the Starfighter combat, and it's so simple.
That's
and
true.
It's so
that is
but it's kind of mindless, but it's just so fun.
Yeah, no, it's a good like, it's a nice break at the end of the day.
And also, taking down a walker with the snowspeeder is still awesome.
That I have not done yet.
Oh yeah, grab the tow cable, give it a try. It's awesome.
Right, you got to do it.
You got to do it.
I just love. I can't for some reason the sound of the thermal imploder is like my favorite thing. So I just keep throwing those at people.
Awesome.
I just love that sound and the effect that it does, where it just sort of launches people into the air. I played this little game. I have a PS Vita, which rarely has any good games on it. But my PlayStation subscription, churns out a couple of free games a month. And last month or the month before, there's this little platformer called Nihil Umbra. It's a weird little game. It's sort of, it's a side-scrolling platformer like Mario Brothers, but I don't even know, it's sort of nihilistic, actually. But you're just this little like shadow working your way through the world. And but what's neat about it is, like, every level you get a different color to paint with, and you can draw your finger along the level. And, like, if you use brown, it becomes sticky. If you use blue, it becomes ice, and you slide. And then, so you have to, by the end of it, you have to use all these different colors in combination to solve the level that you're on. Like, you'll need to be able to bounce and then stick to a place and then slide across. So you have to sort of combine all the things together by the end of it. And it's fun. It works really well. It takes a long time to load each level, but it's a fun little game, and it was free. So if you have PlayStation Plus or whatever, it was worth getting. And then I've been playing Splendor, which we talked about earlier, on the iPad. I got that mostly just to do while we were watching TV, because my wife sometimes likes to watch TV shows that I'm not that interested in. So nice. Splendor has some little puzzles on it. Actually, it renders the game perfectly. It's gorgeous. And I think it does have pass and play, Russ. I know you like to do that.
I do like those.
But it also has this thing where it's like challenges. So it'll set up a scenario that you have to beat in so many moves or something like that. It's sort of like chess puzzles. It's, so it's kind of, it's a neat little time waster, if nothing else. But I think it would be good for like pass and play. If your family likes playing Splendor and you're at dinner or something, you could pass it. It works on the iPhone also, so you could definitely do that.
Very cool.
So those are the video games, and I don't know if we're going through everything or
keep going, man. What are you watching for shows?
So I've been watching a lot of shows because I've been doing a lot of painting, and I just like to balance my iPad on my painting table. And the problem is some of the shows have gotten so good that I forget to paint. One of them is Man in the High Castle. I know you said you.
That was good.
That's great. Really good.
Did you get all the way through it?
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't tell me.
Okay.
I'm only like halfway through, but every time that Edelweiss song comes on, it freaks me out.
That intro is so awesome.
Yeah.
So good.
But I'm loving that. There's an anime I've been watching called Aldnoah Zero. Mm-hmm. I don't know have you guys seen this?
I have not.
No, yeah. I hadn't watched an anime in years, and I don't even remember how I found out about it. I started watching it on Crunchyroll, and then it showed up on Netflix. And now there's a season 2 that just dropped like a week ago. I haven't started watching it, but it's basically it's one of these Japanese animes where it's all like school children forced into battle in giant robots.
Of course, that's what we do, right?
But it does sort of confront it's pretty dark and it's pretty twisty. Like there's a lot of backstabbing and things going wrong, but there's the basic premise is that Mars has this princess who comes to Earth as a diplomat, and she is assassinated, or so it appears. And so it starts this interplanetary war between the people on Mars and the people on Earth. And I won't spoil the rest of it, but inevitably there's sequences of teenage kids who were up until then in private school in Japan, now commanding these giant walkers aboard flying aircraft carriers and stuff. And it's a lot of fun. I think it's
they'd be the best at it.
Yeah, of course. Right. Why use fighter pilots when you can have 14-year-old girls?
Clearly.
We learned about it in Ender's Game anyway, right? Ender's Game started all this, so we know that you take the kids, you put them in some kind of robotic situation, and they're fine.
Hey, that's true.
Right.
Worked for Ender.
Right. Kind of
worked for her.
Right. Kind of.
So let's see. I watched that. Movies. I haven't seen too many movies in the theater. I saw Spectre in the theater. I saw Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I'm a huge James Bond fan, so I had to see Spectre. I'm not sure if you're not a James Bond fan where you had to see it. But.
Yeah, I thought Spectre was. What did you think about Spectre as a Bond fan?
So I think it's a Roger Moore James Bond movie with
yes,
Craig, with Daniel Craig as James Bond. That's the problem with it.
It was a little more Roger Moore-y than his stuff was used to, so it threw it off a little bit. And it
right, exactly.
But he didn't pull off sort of the campiness that Moore was able to do as well. So it kind of like, it was sort of in the middle someplace, and it didn't really know where it wanted to be, I think. That's how I felt about it.
That's exactly right. It's like they got all excited because they could use Blofeld again, because that was like tied up in 30 years of litigation.
Right.
And then they didn't really know what to do with it, because Blofeld is really a storyline from the 1970s.
Right.
It's like, well, now what do we do?
Right.
I thought it was a really anticlimactic ending for the big boss.
But there were a bunch of anticlimactic parts.
But like that's kind of normal for Blofeld. I mean, he's going to get away and do something else that's colossally stupid in the next one, right? I mean, that's.
But wasn't every climax anticlimactic? So like the car chase sort of just ended, and the way the base was blown up was sort of like, really?
That's what I mean. The main thing for me is the way the place blew up.
I know, right?
Yeah, it was like he found the one red barrel.
I tweeted that. I tweeted right after I saw the movie, and some people claim this is a spoiler, but I literally tweeted, the number 185 on the evil overlord list. I will place armor around all my propane tanks.
Exactly.
It's like, come on.
It really was like a level of GoldenEye where you just shoot the red tank and the whole base goes up. Right. If we're spoiling Spectre for you, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but at this point.
Well, look, it's a James Bond movie. He's going to hook up with a couple of women. He's going to get the bad guy.
It was still fun. I still liked it, but it was. He's had better Bond films. That was not one of his better ones.
Yeah, not his best movie.
Yeah.
But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, I've seen them all.
There's not really a bad Bond. See, I'm such a Bond fan. There's no bad Bond film. There's just some that are much better than others. Really.
Yeah, that's right. I feel the same way. Yeah. So I saw that. I watched Ex Machina finally on the Netflix.
Yeah, what'd you think?
We talked about this in the Lost Chapters actually, but I think Ex Machina is a really good movie, but I am a really big Stanley Kubrick fan, and I'm okay with like long periods of deep discomfort in a movie. And Ex Machina is like 2 hours of that, basically.
Yeah,
it's
pretty much.
Not a comfortable movie.
Yeah.
But I liked it. I think Alicia Vikander was amazing in that movie. And I guess she just won an Oscar, didn't she? So
yes, so there you go.
Some other people think she knows.
Some other people agree with you.
Yes.
But it wasn't for that.
No.
I don't think. Let's see. I watched Jessica Jones all the way through.
Now, what'd you think of Jessica Jones?
Oh my God,
I loved it.
Good.
I love that show. Oh my God, was it good?
I loved it. I want to go back and watch Daredevil all over again.
I know, right? Yeah.
I love Daredevil too, and I think a new season's about to start on that.
There is, yeah. And there was a little bit of crossover. There was a little bit of crossover in Jessica Jones. Not a lot. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a little bit.
Yeah, there's a little bit, and they take place in the same universe, and they must literally be around the corner from each other.
Well, they are because there is crossover, right? So that this isn't a spoiler, but the nurse is in both of them, right?
Yeah.
So the same nurse that helps Daredevil helps Luke Cage actually, but the other thing that's setting us up, right? Luke Cage is in it, which means Iron Fist cannot be far behind, right?
That's right. They are making that.
I know. So they're doing a little Marvel universe right inside of Netflix. Like the whole thing is.
Well, I have to say, I think these two are the best contribution. I haven't seen Deadpool yet, but these are the best contributions to the Marvel universe I've seen on film yet.
Yes. Well, careful because you'll get emails about how
Deadpool's better.
Deadpool's not part of the Marvel universe, so just be careful.
Ooh.
It's part of the
Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
It is not a part.
It's part of the X-Men side of it.
Oh.
So there's this little fissure. There's a little fissure.
The good side. It's part of the good side of the Marvel.
Well,
if we're sending emails.
Well, I don't know. Good. I mean, because I kind of feel like the Avengers is a good movie, but anyway, we can debate.
Yeah. No. Hey, you and a couple 100 million other people too.
Right.
No, I've actually always been partial to the X-Men movies over the Avengers movies, but I think they're all fun.
Yeah.
I like my movies a little darker.
See, for me, it's just because I've always been a Captain America guy. So anything with Captain America in it is pretty much a win for me.
Well, I do like the cap. I have Captain America on my desk, actually, one of those little pop Funko things at work. All
right.
So I'm a big fan. But anyway, we're not going to out Marvel one another.
No. But the other thing, too, is that the Daredevil and Jessica Jones, though, definitely take place in the same universe as the Avengers because they reference the attacks on New York and the aliens.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's all in the same, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that's all taking place. But these shows on Netflix are much darker than anything else.
Yeah,
including the movies,
and that's
which is
of course
great.
why I like them. But I think I like the fact that they can make adult. They don't have to see the problem with the Avengers movies. To me, is they have to, for budget reasons, if no other reason, they have to make them like cafeteria food. Like they have to make them tolerable to as wide an audience as possible.
Right. They're mass market. Right.
Yeah, and I get that, but that's why I think Deadpool's so cool. I need to go see that.
No, Daredevil's definitely not mass market.
Not
it's definitely, and it definitely did well. So yeah, it does prove that you can do dark comedy at least, and be okay. Yeah.
Right. So let's see what else. Robotech. Remember Robotech?
Yes, I love Robotech. I've tried to get my girls to get into Robotech, and I cannot sell it to them.
I got the whole box set for Christmas like 2 years ago, and I opened it like not too long ago one night while I was like punching chits out of some new board game and started watching the old episodes of Robotech again, and now I'm hooked on it.
I have the miniature game, I haven't put it together yet.
I have it too because I'm a 6mm sci-fi.
I know. I have the whole box, and I look at it, and I'm like, I really should assemble that.
Well, I will tell you, that will be the next 6 months of your life.
But the problem is, too, Ken, is there's 3 models for every Veritech. So it's like, really?
Not only that, for each one of those little 6mm models, there's like 20 pieces.
Oh, I know. Oh,
they're tiny.
Yeah.
They're really detailed. Actually, I really like them, but they were not what I expected. They're definitely like model kits.
I think I'm just going to build one. I'm just going to build one and put it on my shelf.
That's what I did.
So much work.
But they are good. And then I wanted to bring this up too. I watched. So I've never really watched Doctor Who. I've seen it, but I've never like gotten into it. So I just decided I was going to start watching it. So I started at the very beginning of what's on Netflix, which I think was Chris Eccleston's first season.
Eccleston is sort of the reboot Doctor Who. It's when it reset itself in the mid 2000s. Yeah.
So where does I'm at the point where it's like I think this is interesting, but it's kind of like a high concept sci-fi TV show on a really high school drama budget.
Yeah, I think high concept is a little bit too much. It's really not that. Maybe when it was originally made, it was sort of high concept because it was when it originally came out. It looked a lot like Star Trek in terms of budget level, right? The old Star Trek. So if you think about, if you watch the original Doctor Who side by side with the original Star Trek, the budget's about the same level. The difference, though, is that Star Trek in the 90s, had a real budget, but Doctor Who, it's definitely come up in the world, but its budget still isn't super high. Like you're not seeing the kind of budget on television with Doctor Who that you see in, even like Jessica Jones or anything like that.
But it's clear that there's so much going on there. I can't figure out where does one start, or does it matter?
Eccleston's where you start. You start with Eccleston and you just start watching it, and what will happen is over enough time you'll start to sort of just understand the relationship of the Doctor to everything else and how it all works and how he's 1 minute he's sort of this carefree guy that seems to not matter, nothing matters to him, to the next minute that he's holding the whole universe together with like chewing gum and duct tape. So it's kind of like you have to kind of watch a few of them to kind of get into the groove of it. But if you stick with it, if Eccleston's not, I like Eccleston, but if he's not working for you, jump right ahead to the next Doctor.
No, I like that. I like him. I just feel like am I wasted? Like I'm not going to, 8 years of I don't know how many episodes of Doctor Who I'm about to be watching.
Go through Eccleston and then watch David Tennant. And
that's going to be hard having watched Jessica Jones first, I think.
Yes, maybe. But when you watch David Tennant as Doctor Who, if that does not hook you, nothing will, because he is the best, I would argue, of the newest Doctors, the 2,000 plus Doctors, he's the best of the bunch. So Capaldi's doing a pretty good job, but Tennant is probably one that really captured most people's imagination and kind of brought back Doctor Who back to the forefront. So
Okay, I'll do it.
All right, good luck.
I'll report back.
All right,
next time
expect the full update.
I'll tell you how much of a Whovian I've become.
Excellent. Any books though? What are you reading?
So actually, this week I've been on vacation, like I said. So I finally got to start reading this book I got for Christmas. First comic book I've had in years, actually. Grayson, Volume 1, which is it's a collection of 5 or 6 comic books. This is about Dick Grayson, Robin and then Nightwing, and so now he's a secret agent in this weird spy ring. Have you guys seen this?
I have not. No.
Ringing a bell? Well, you know who Dick Grayson is, right? So
yes.
I don't know how far
we
back to go.
Yeah, no, we're good.
My other son's actually named Grayson, but it's totally unrelated. my wife picked the name, but I like to tell people that he's named after Robin. For geek cred, like I need it, and
I'm sure she loves that.
If you like James Bond, Russ, and you like comic books,
okay,
it's really great because it has a very James Bond like pacing, and it's clearly it's sort of the intersection of James Bond and Batman, as if like Skyfall, and I've actually read that Christopher Nolan, when he made his movies, tried to sort of emulate James Bond movies, and it sort of gets that feel. I'm not really sure what he's up to yet, but he's definitely doing like secret agent missions and, going after some weird conspiracy that's stealing, biological weapons and stuff. And, there's women and guns and, all that kind of stuff. And it's not your normal comic book fare, I don't think, but it's a neat little story. I'm sure longtime DC fans will, know how it all ties into the larger world, the history of, Batman is because there are parts where he's like reporting back to Batman, like he's on a secret mission, like within a secret mission that I don't understand because there's obviously a larger world there, but it's really well drawn and it moves. The story is it's fast paced and it's just fun. It was great for a vacation. Actually, I read through most of it last night. Actually,
cool.
And then I've been reading this other book called The Making of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is my favorite book. It's this huge like coffee table book with all these giant foldouts of all these behind the scenes like artwork and concept art and photographs of the sets and interviews with all these people. And if you like that movie, it is like a compendium of that movie. It's sort of everything you ever wanted to know about 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is my favorite movie of all time. So,
nice.
It's just been fun. I'm not a big novel reader. Not that I don't. I think I read too much at work, so I don't sit down and read novels for fun. But I do like nonfiction stuff, and it's also got a lot of great pictures. But
I kind of feel like 2001 is sort of the most referenced reason why self-driving cars are a bad idea. When you kind of think about it. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, that's true. But fortunately, you shouldn't need to be put into hypersleep or whatever to use your car.
No, it's like, open the garage door, Hal.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't see it happening. That's the problem. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to derail the conversation.
No, that's fair. It's fair criticism. So that's what I've been.
Good.
Reading.
You have been quite the
busy
digital little geek there. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, also to be fair, it's been over a year and like 2 or 3 years since my last episode.
Right. So you got it. I'm glad. It's good
I gotta
stuff.
Squeeze it all
good
in.
Stuff. So
how about you, Russ?
Well, okay. Well, throw it to me. Excellent, Ken. See, I like it. That's nice. I like it. You choice wisely there.
Equal time.
I'm going to keep mine short here because we are going a little long, but still enjoying. No, don't be sorry. It was awesome stuff. So really enjoying the Iron Druid Chronicle, still on Audible, having a great time with that. And unfortunately, though, in the TV department, I've decided I'm going to give up on Arrow.
Yeah.
So I've been watching Arrow for a while, and I've been watching Flash, going back and forth. I'm finding myself enjoying Flash, and I'm finding myself caring about Arrow less and less. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. I'm starting to feel like the plots are recycling in Arrow a little bit. Like we're just changing the character, going through the same journey, just like shifting one person at a time. And it's starting to feel a little formulaic to me. And I'm kind of, here we go. This is the same formula we had last time. We're just making it on, Dingle now, or whoever. They just like flip it over. So I'm like, oh, man. So Flash, though, still enjoying Flash. It's campy as ever. There's a whole second Earth, and there's dimensional travel, and there's another Flash named Zoom, and he's a bad guy, and all this stuff. But it doesn't matter. It's fun. It's campy fun. So I'm enjoying it.
Now, have you kept up with that other one, the spinoff?
No. Legends of Tomorrow, I have only watched the pilot, and I haven't gotten back to it. Have you?
No.
I enjoyed the pilot. Didn't capture me enough, and frankly, there's so many other shows. I'm not.
Well, that's
really,
my problem. I have not watched a lot of shows at all lately.
Yeah.
So.
Well, also modeling a lot. Same problem. So also though, did get out to see Zootopia this weekend.
Oh, as did I.
The
what did you think?
new Disney film. My kids and I and my wife really enjoyed it. I described it as the Richard Scarry buddy cop movie you've always wanted to see.
Who's Richard Scarry?
So Richard Scarry is the author of these kids' books. And in Richard Scarry books, you've probably seen them. They are all these little animals that are dressed in human clothing driving different kind of cars. And so on these pages of Richard Scarry books, you'll see like a bus with a bunch of ants in it that's the size of a matchbox. And then right next to that, there's like an elephant driving an SUV. So it's like
Yes, that's very similar.
It's like a Rich and Scary book come to life. But I think the plot was actually pretty good. I liked the story, and I really enjoyed the visuals. Like, I loved the idea and the concept of Zootopia as a city and how there are the different districts. And, there's an area dedicated to the Arctic and an area dedicated to the rainforest and an area dedicated so that all these different animals could live together. It was a pretty neat concept. So I really,
I thought it dealt with some very interesting, heavy themes in a really cool way.
It did. It really did. It was I thought it was a really fun movie. It was a really good job to Disney, and
as did I.
So anyway, so that's my stuff, Craig. What about you?
What about me? Well, for me, I am still trying. I just finished The Walking Dead through the Compendium 3. Mm-hmm. So I churned through that. And I have to say, Compendium 1 and 2, which is the first 16 trade paperbacks, I don't get it. I don't know why it became a big cult hit, because it was like, okay. Compendium 3 was awesome. Really cool stories, really cool bad guys, conflict, much better than just your average run-of-the-mill zombie story. I think Compendium 3 is what everybody says the whole thing is, which is like, the zombies are just there, but we're the real Walking Dead, and the real conflict is between the living. And other than every now and then somebody like the governor pops his head up, other than that, it's not. Compendium 1 and 2, I didn't really get that feeling. Compendium 3, I really did, so that was cool. And I'm only one trade paperback away from having all caught up on the storyline, but I'm just going to leave it off for a year or 2 or 3 until the next compendium comes out. I'm still slogging through J.J. Abrams' S to the point where I have this completist attitude. I have to finish things that I start. But I went online to start looking at reviews, and I'm seeing most of the reviews are like, J.J. Abrams is the greatest. But every now and then I stumble across a review that's having the exact same experience I am, where it's a really cool idea, the production values are amazing, and the story's just falling flat. So I'm not really happy that I started this whole journey. And it's a journey. It's not just reading. Still listening to The Expanse on Audible and loving it because it's in my library. So I didn't even have to pay for it this time around. So my credits are ratcheting up while I listen to these awesome books that I already own. So that was cool.
Nice.
Still watching Longmire. I love it. It's like cowboy CSI. Very cool. Although you can tell there's a very sharp difference when I don't even know what network was producing it, but that network dropped it and Netflix picked it up. So now it's a Netflix original. And there were obviously some contract issues because a couple major characters get killed off very quickly all of a sudden. And then the whole thing just kind of like, boom, up, reset. Okay, keep going. And it's kind of cool because now there's no fade in and out for where the commercials would have been and stuff like that. Black Sails this season is great. I'm absolutely loving that as well. And as far as writing, I'm finishing up my top secret FFG assignment. I'm about a week or 2 weeks ahead of schedule on that, so I'm excited about that and getting really good feedback on those things. I'm just ramping up on a top secret assignment that I can't even tell you what game or company it's for yet. And I'm continuing the groundwork for my first fantasy novel, which I'm hoping to start in the next month or so. So keeping busy on all fronts. And that's me.
Also a secret.
That one's that's just my stuff. So I want to keep it a secret from all these other secrets are other people's secrets. That's my secret.
Nice. So is that achievements?
That is achievements.
In a world where board gaming was king, in a time when Kickstarter ruled the web, when every day brought more and more games, now, more than ever, 2 men, and a revolving third chair, and a girl, a total fangirl, brought a shining light into the darkness so that all mankind would know what to buy. They are the D6 generation.
Hooah! And now it's time to talk about our fine friends over at Battle Foam.
Yeah, buddy. Battle Foam, the place to go on the internet for all your foamy goodness. Right, Craig?
That's right. You got to protect those models. How much money and time and effort you have wrapped up in those models. I do
too.
Because I had to do a big insurance form about it.
Right, exactly. If you go, so right, I feel so bad for you, Craig. But yes, unfortunately, if you had to do hard-sided battle foam,
it'd be even better.
It's waterproof,
None
right?
of my guys were in battle foam that got ruined.
There's a seal around the new hard plastics. Those are amazing.
They are. We actually got to see one.
We did. We gave one away at Captain Con. But yeah, the new black label stuff, there's actually a seal around it. So not only you can run them over, but you can also spill stuff on the case and you're completely fine. But, most folks don't, fortunately for most folks, Craig, they don't run into water. The biggest problem is transporting your models. Let's say you're going to Adepticon coming up here in a couple weeks.
Yep.
And you need to transport your models. You want to take a lot of them. You got to check that bag because there's really not room in the plane anymore for your carry-on and your battle foam bag. Got to check something. And
That's right.
If you, I have checked my bags for battle foam, and they've made it just fine thanks to the custom cut foam, the extremely strong, hard plastic sides. Just amazing products for make sure, just as you said, Craig, to keep everything safe and sound.
Great. You cannot do any better than battle foam for protecting your models and your investment.
And don't forget to check out all the great bags for specific game systems as well. They've got pretty much everything. And now board games as well. Great foam for all your board games also to get everything organized and put together. Head on over to battlefoam.com.
Hooah!
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present...
Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep.
Seriously, Wakeland, I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pap.
Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome to another App of the Ep. This time around, I want to talk about an app that I've recently gotten back into. I've been doing a lot of traveling lately for both work and pleasure. And of course, when you're stuck on an airplane, I think I've mentioned on the show before that my current portable travel device is a Surface Pro 3, not the 4, but the 3. It is an i7 model, so it's got a pretty good processor in it, but there's no graphics card to speak of. So while I'm traveling with this thing, of course, I like to, especially on long plane flights to California or whatever, I want to get a little gaming in. And lately I've wanted to play some Meteor games. But of course, because it's not super powerful, I kind of go back to older games and see if I can find an older game that I'm really enjoying. And I just brought back a game that runs great, and I actually get pretty solid battery life out of it, so it's not using too much juice. And man, is this a great game. And it is Age of Wonders 3. It's not that old. It came out back in 2014, so it's a couple years old now. And they've released a couple add-on packs for it, but you don't need any of those. Just get the core game if you'd like. It's reasonably affordable on Steam now, but this is a turn-based strategy game. Really great fantasy-based game. There's I think 5 different factions. If you get the expansion, I think there's 6 factions now you can play. The core game comes with 2 full campaigns, and there's also a great multiplayer mode. Now, what I like about this game a lot is if you are a fantasy fan, particularly if you used to be an old-school Warhammer Fantasy Battles fan, this game will be right up your alley. Because not only is it a great map-based campaign game, and it's got sort of a civilization feel to it in that you build and settle cities, and where you put the cities on the large sort of hex-based map will indicate the kind of resources it has. So you want to get it near mana wells. You want to get it near, shrines and other powerful areas of power to give the city different bonuses. And then you can build things inside the city, like different kinds of buildings, like a supply house so the city grows faster. So it's very civilization-like. But what's cool about it is it's fantasy based. So, and the army you pick, the leader of the army you pick, and then the race of the army you pick dictates the kind of units you're going to have access to. So, of course, you pick the elves, you can pick the humans, you can discover other races as you expand, and you can ally with them. So, if you ally with the fairies, for example, now you've got access to some fae and maybe little sprites that fly around on the battlefield, things like that. So really interesting, really good diplomacy. But what makes the game excellent is really the combat system. So when you actually go to fight, this is what really makes the game great. One of the criticisms of Civilization, which by the way I love all the Civilization games, but one of the criticisms of it is the battles are kind of abstract and sort of high level. But in this game, the battle zooms right in, and you're actually on the battlefield in a turn-based strategy game mode where each of the units in your army are right there on the tabletop. And what's cool is on the strategic view, on the overhead map view, you've got one icon for each of your armies, and only one icon can be in each hex, right? So you might have, and usually the icon is the most powerful unit or the hero leader. You can have heroes too, and you develop your heroes, and you level them up, and you give them different equipment, you give them spells, and everything else, which is awesome. They all have special abilities depending on their race. But you attach them to these armies, and you get 6 units in the army, so the hero plus 5 other units in there. So you might put in 2 units of elven longswordsmen and 2 units of elven archers and maybe a couple units of elven spellcasters and that might be your whole army. But what's really cool is you can then, if you have any other armies of up to 6 units in adjacent hexes when you attack, every adjacent army is involved. So a lot of the time you're battling just one hex versus one hex. You've got, battles of, 3, 2, 3, 5, 6 units on 6 units fighting. But when you get the multiple hex battles going on, you can get really large unit counts on the battlefield with like 6 per hex. You can have 4, 5, 6 hexes involved at 6 units of hex, and you get really massive engagements. And what's really cool too is the terrain you engage on affects the battlefield you're on. So if you're fighting over a mine, you're fighting around a mine, and there's things from a mining encampment all in the way. Or if you're fighting a bandit camp, there's bandit walls in the way you got to break through. Or if you're sieging a castle, there's actually castle walls. If you're going through tunnels between, under the continents, you'll be fighting underground. If you go and you battle in a swamp, you got swamps. You get the idea. And different terrain types, of course, affect units differently. Of course, there are flying units and ground units, and you can have artillery and trebuchets and cannons. There's a whole faction that's around, sort of steampunk era stuff. And really, really good. I can't overstate how fun this game is and how really tactical and very miniature war game the combat feels. Very, very, very good. And that is Age of Wonders 3. You'll love it. What I'm liking about it a lot is I'm getting like 3 or 4 hours out of it on my Surface playing it, which I'm really enjoying because it's good for a nice plane flight. Most of the other, if I play any higher end games on my Surface, I get about an hour out of it. But on this, I'm getting 3 or 4 hours, which I'm really enjoying. So check out Age of Wonders 3 on Steam.
Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App, a segment in which,
hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show.
Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back. And as we mentioned earlier, as Ken mentioned in Achievements, he, of course, and his fellow gamer buddies are hard at work.
I believe you could call it a cohort.
I would call it a cohort or
could be a
brigade.
legion.
Cabal? Is it a cabal, maybe? I don't know.
Well, look at that. I see what you just did.
Producing the new game over here running on Kickstarter, Polyversal, which is being billed as a, let me make sure I get this right, 6mm sci-fi game.
It is, indeed. Mass combat, even.
Yeah, this looks really awesome. But so, Ken, we want to dive into this with you, get kind of to know this game, what got you into this game. But first, Craig has to ask you the question that we ask every guest that's first time in the third chair.
Right.
Craig,
and it used to seem clever. Now it just seems silly.
It seems trite, but
tradition has a weight of its own.
It does.
Ken, are you now or have you ever been a gamer? Because actually, if you answer this incorrectly, we're probably going to have to sue you for misrepresentation of your gamer music segment that you did so often a while ago. Because we've kind of got it on record that you are a gamer. So are you, Ken Whitehurst, in fact, a gamer?
And you are under oath. Keep in mind, you are, in fact, under oath at this point.
After however many questions I just got wrong with Geekly McNardigan, I'm not sure I can really answer this question correctly, but
most of those
I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
That's very stressful, by the way.
Imagine you can't. You don't have to imagine. Through the magic of time travel, you've already done it for real.
It's
I see what you did there. Look, you're out podcasting the podcaster. I give up. I withdraw.
See, this is what happens when you try to negotiate.
How did you get into gaming? You ask him, Russ. He scares me.
All right. So Ken, what was the game that sort of made you realize I am in fact a gamer?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't know where it started. The earliest memory I have that tells me I know I'm a gamer is that when I was in kindergarten, I got some money for my birthday.
Right.
And we went to the local, store, like general department store kind of thing. And I picked up some toys and then I put them down and exchanged them for a game. And then I exchanged that for this box that had 50 games in it. And they were, they were like these little cheap, these weren't Die Macher and, Blood Rage or any of these kind of things. But it was one of these little like red boxes with like all these different games in it because one just didn't seem like enough. I needed 50. And then, it was Chutes and Ladders and those kind of things. But it was, I remember that as even now I'm 39 now. And ever since then, I've known that whatever it is about reading rules and moving things according to those rules, I've liked since I was really little. It goes all the way back to that. And my family played a lot of games when I was a kid. My grandparents on my dad's side used to play these games that no one plays anymore, like Spite and Malice and 31 and card games that they may well have made up. I don't know. But
right.
And we played those kind of games. And then I found the first like real kind of game that probably people have played, people consider, hardcore gaming was, I remember getting Samurai Sword's predecessor, a Shogun.
Yes, Shogun, right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was
one
of my favorites.
Second or third grade. And it was really complicated for me, but I loved it. And I just moving a little samurai around, and it was, I would just make people play that with me.
Awesome.
And then Axis and Allies and all of those kind of games.
All the Milton Bradley Master Series, right?
Yep, there you go.
Right. So after the Milton Bradley thing, I think, I'm not sure what the next game was. Probably Talisman. The second edition.
That's the GW gateway drug right there.
It really is. And, we had older brothers and sisters and stuff who played Dungeons and Dragons around, but I never played much of that. But Talisman it really hit me somewhere. It was like fantasy that you didn't have to,
work for.
Yeah, exactly. It was like lazy fantasy, which is perfect for me. And I loved Talisman, and we played that for a while, and then Heroescape, and but then I discovered miniatures gaming, but I discovered it in a way that most people didn't in our generation probably, and that is I actually found H.G. Wells's Little Wars in the library.
Old school. Wow.
That is the old school.
Right. That is how I discovered miniature wargaming in the public library, which is a thing people used to go to before there was an internet.
Yes.
And I found it, among the books on hobbies or whatever. I used to paint, model kits and stuff, so I'd go look for things about that. But I found that, and I set up little green army men, and I got a pellet gun from 7-Eleven or something that fired those little plastic yellow things.
Yep.
And I would force my friends to play on the floor where we would move the figures around and shoot them with the little pellet gun, which is how Little Wars worked. But it was I think it was like a matchstick cannon in the original, of course, from whenever H.G. Wells wrote it. But we didn't have those, and so we did that for a while. And then when I became a teenager, I was into science fiction, and I went to a local science fiction convention, and I found a copy of this weird magazine with pictures of little miniatures in it, and it was White Dwarf. And
there you go.
But it was an issue of White Dwarf that focused on epic.
Oh yes.
And that was the first real commercial miniature war game I ever saw in a magazine in this convention. And it was, of course, a British magazine, and no one in America, or certainly not in my town, sold that kind of thing. I mean, it wasn't in Toys R Us, and it wasn't at the mall. And so I found Epic. Actually, it was in the mall. There was a hobby shop in the mall that had it, like in the back with the role-playing game stuff that I never really went to look at. But I found it, and I got a Space Marine for my 16th birthday.
Oh, wow. There you go.
My dad said, this was really expensive, and I know you're never going to play with it. So I still am.
You showed him.
Right. So this is really just a way to get back at my dad, which is really like all good things in life. So yeah, I've been way into miniatures gaming ever since then. It went from that to, I played Magic a little bit, but it went from, and I've always loved board games. So it took on two parallel tracks of board gaming, just like you guys, right? Board gaming and I played some card games and then miniatures. So I went on the miniature side from Epic to BattleTech to Fantasy and 40K, some. I was never as much into those as I was the what people call smaller scale, but I call larger scale
Right,
games.
because it's bigger battle.
Right. Yeah. Dirt Side 2, Ogre, all of those kind of.
So, are you a huge Ogre fan? Did you spring for the $400 reprint there?
I may or may not have my name on the side of that box. Yes.
Really? Oh,
yeah, he's in.
You can hunt through the Ks to find Ken Whitehurst on the tiny print along the side of the designer edition of Ogre. Awesome. The game is so big, I don't have a shelf in my house large enough to hold it. It's sitting on the floor next to a piano because it's just nowhere else to put it.
Nice.
Kingdom Death Monster is also that big. I have it. It's a little narrower, but it's just huge. And so, I basically think about gaming all the time. My Twitter handle is actually Weekly Wargamer, but it's basically a lie.
Because it's daily?
Because I can't possibly play every week now that I have kids. But I do I play a lot of solo. I stay up late at night and play and think about it. And so Polyversal came out of all of those interests.
So that's so interesting. So Polyversal really
perfect segue.
Yeah, perfect segue. So
man's a pro.
So what did you start seeing in games? I mean, I guess we've talked about this before on the show where like everybody's got a great American novel in them. It feels like every gamer's got a game in them somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Was this sort of that, like you wanted to write one, or was it more, were you playing these games and felt like no one had quite gotten it right, or what was sort of the impetus for like, I think I can make one of these and I have a real reason why?
Yeah, I think it's that last one. I've always, even when I was a kid, I would make games. I remember making a game using battle beasts. Remember those things that were like little action figures that had, they had like wood or water or fire on them, and you like, it was like rock, paper, scissors. I had a bunch of those lying around when I was a kid, and I made a board game that was, it turns out, a lot like Talisman before I had seen Talisman. They just wandered around the board, and you could get followers and people to come with you, and you fought each other and rolled dice. And actually, it was a spinner. I had a spinner.
There you go.
Which I think is a highly underused mechanic.
Spinner?
Frankly.
Hey, the game of life got a few things right. Spinner was one of them.
Yeah, I think so.
That and terrain,
It's funny. Mark Walker, who's a war game designer, and I have talked about using spinners in war games before, and we can never convince people it's a good idea. But
it does feel kind of
if you think about it, it's a perfect mechanic because you can adjust the angle of the spaces to be the perfect. You could come up with really complex percentages using the amount of pi. If you imagine the circle.
Yeah.
Divided up unevenly, you could really come up with good hit percentages. But
I see
for some reason, people just think it's for children.
I see what you're saying about the spinner, but I really think it's all about the Pop-O-Matic. I think if you could bring the Pop-O-Matic back, you have something there.
Okay. I'm writing that down.
Throwing it out there. I don't want to tell you how to make your game, but
no. If we get to stretch goals, Pop-O-Matic might be.
Pop-O-Matic. It's better than a dice tray, Ken, because you can't lose the dice. They can't miss and fall out and knock miniatures over.
Yeah, but you can't swap the dice out, which is important.
No,
but as far as designing it, I think some of it is just that tinkering thing, like you said. Everybody thinks they've got better rules. I've never been one like when we played Epic a lot when I was a teenager. And, a lot, and I still have pretty much everything they ever made for it. And my friends used to think like, well, we could just make new stats. We have other stuff. We could just add stats for that. And I'm like, it's not in the rules. GW hasn't made a chart for this. It doesn't exist, And so I was very much like that.
So even then you were a lawyer.
And now I'm a lawyer, yeah.
Right.
And ironically, I am literally a professional rules lawyer. My day job is to actually enforce the bankruptcy code for the United States government. So I make people play by the rules for a living.
Look at that.
Right.
So, which is funny because in gaming, I'm very much not a rules lawyer. I don't argue. I'm just like, fine, whatever. If you want to win that badly, roll the dice. Just go. I don't care. I think the design came from, over the years having more and more miniatures in my collection and wanting very badly to see the GW figures fight the BattleTech figures.
Oh, really?
At the end of the day, I looked over what I had and went, there's no reason you can't do this. And especially once GW stopped supporting Epic or rewrote it, a couple of times. I started finding other games, and I had 3 or 4 really good miniatures games in my collection at that point. Now, God knows how many I have now. I'm afraid to look. I have a shelf full of them and an entire closet full of miniatures. But there's no reason why one IP can't fight another IP in some grand, battle, other than the companies that own the IP don't want you to do that.
Right.
But there's no, they can't tell me what to do. At the end of the day.
They're not the boss of me.
They're not. I bought them fair and square. I can do whatever I want with them.
Right.
So that's sort of how it came about, because once Epic stopped being supported, and BattleTech I liked, but it wasn't. I respect BattleTech. I think it's the right thing. BattleTech is an enormous contribution to gaming. Its background is second to none in its complexity and size. The amount of data for BattleTech is just staggering. But it's so staggering, actually, at this point, I don't even know where to start anymore. It's huge. And the stories are great, but the games are they're really skirmish games. I think, you get 5 or 6 mechs, and that's a solid game. If you want to play 30, 40, vehicles, Alpha Strike helps. But now, 10 years ago, that was a weekend. You'd be and you'd be filling out all these charts, and you really need the free time to do that. And when I was in high school, that was easier.
So to sum it up, you wanted a large engagement system that let you mix and match, models or IP or whatever from any game to any game. Was kind of what started this.
That's the short. Yeah, that's what I should have said.
No, it's great. So when you started, so you woke up one day and you're like, so I'm going to make a game, or how did it go from just a crazy idea on a napkin to this is something I'm going to do?
Probably. I don't know. I think it was probably. I used to run Dirt Side 2 games at a convention, local convention. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that game.
I have, yeah. It's pretty cool.
And it basically is this concept. But it never. When you run it at a convention, part of the problem is it bogs down a lot. The game is great because it'll accommodate pretty much anything, but you have to do a lot of legwork, and it has a lot of record keeping. There were chits for everything, and there's you'll see there's certainly some in Polyversal. I'm not saying we solved that, but one of the things that was really unique about that game was that you would draw chits out of a bag when you hit something. That way, instead of rolling to hit, you'd roll and then you'd draw out of a bag and then flip the tiles over. And what they told you was you'd compare that to this color-coded thing, and then that would tell you what happened, which is great for a little while, but it's really slow when you're talking about lots of stuff. And it's not intuitive. And people, sort of hung up on that. And I think what it was my undergraduate degree is actually in cognitive science and philosophy, but the cognitive science student in me went, there's a better way to do this that would keep the level of complexity they're going for, but speed up the rate at which the player could get the information that they needed and move on.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you could reduce it to 1 D6 roll, and if you roll a 5 or better, it's a hit, but that's just not as much fun.
Right.
And it's been done. It takes a lot of the flavor out of it. Because what I really wanted to keep was the original, I guess it was 2nd edition Epic, had a ton of flavor in it. Everything was different.
Right.
The orcs had a whole thing, and there was a lot of variety to the units. When they rewrote Epic to Epic 40,000, they took all the flavor out.
Yeah,
but they actually made technically a better game, I think. But it was much more generic. And then when they rewrote that to Epic Armageddon, they hit somewhere in the middle. I think they did a good job, but they were missing. They've never gone back to the amount of complexity in the flavor that Epic had, and Dirtside never had that kind of flavor because it couldn't. And so I wanted to have a certain amount of uniqueness to the units. Like if you had some whatever type of vehicle you created or miniature you already had, I wanted to be able to represent that pretty pretty carefully, but pretty quickly. Like, I wanted to have enough detail that you knew what it was, but you could do it fairly efficiently. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I wanted like the level of complexity of BattleTech's representation, but not the level of complexity of how to actually do it. If that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So cool. So so you had the idea. You kind of knew what you wanted to do. There's a lot of folks involved with this project. How did you sort of start down the path of finding people to work with you on this project?
Well, so I will tell you, if you're listening to this and you want to make a game, just make it. Don't wait for anybody to tell you, because you have to make the thing. And so what I did was, I sat down on a business trip in a hotel every night for a week and just typed it out. And then I programmed a computer program to make the cards that I needed, the stat cards.
Right.
And that's actually, there's a great little program called Nandeck. There's probably better ones now, but and it has its own little language, but you can code it it'll take text files and turn them into cards.
Yep.
So I programmed that to use I could then type in the stats on these text files and it would just print out cards that were really nice looking and color coded, which was really the key to the game. So I did all of that. And what I did was I decided my gaming club at the time was going to produce its own gaming convention in Williamsburg called the Williamsburg Muster, which is now quite large actually. But when it started, we didn't know who, if anybody was going to show up. So we all said, we're going to run games. That's the thing. We have to have games. So I said, I'm going to make one. We're not going to do Dirt Side. I'm going to just make one. And so I convinced myself that when that convention started, I was going to have a game ready to go. And it was just, and I'll tell you, that's the best motivator you can possibly have.
Because you had a deadline. I have to have my game.
You have a deadline. People are coming to play. And you've got to get the terrain. You got to get everything painted. And it's got to work. Then I realized what I had committed myself to.
Right.
But I knew in my head that it worked. But there's nothing like finally getting all the stuff made. The quick reference cards, the stat cards, just stuff that you could hand it to perfect strangers and say, here's how it works, and watch them do it. Right. And I thought, well, if it goes badly, we roll some dice, we'll get a drink, it'll be fun.
Right.
And a few friends played, and then so a few friends played for the first hour at this con. I set up a big thing that would just sort of run for the afternoon.
Yeah. So did you have your own terrain you'd made for it? Were you using some of your old models?
Yeah. This game included, my God, it included Epic, I could name 10 different manufacturers probably of miniatures, but BattleTech stuff, Epic stuff, and then a bunch of other 6mm miniatures like, Reveresco, Dark Realm. Well, this was before Dark Realm existed. Brigade. It was before Hawk War Games existed. This was in 2009. So there were generic mechs that were out at the time, HeroClix mechs, Mech Warrior mechs that I had repainted, that kind of stuff. You name it. I had some Gundam models.
Nice.
Which are just huge. a 1/100th scale Gundam at 6mm scale is it's like an Imperator Titan times 2. So we had this thing set up, and the buildings I had been collecting 6mm buildings for years because I'd been playing Dirt Side. Right. Then I built this thing called, they called it Mr. Teleporter by the time I finished it, but it was a coffee pot that I had gutted and put one of those plasma discs in for the heat, where the heating element used to be.
Right, yep.
So it was this giant teleporter. And part of the scenario was it was the battle for the planetary teleporter. So things could teleport into the game onto this plasma disc.
Nice.
And, at a con, anything that lights up automatically draws attention.
Right.
Especially if it's got that plasma effect thing. So,
see, Craig, this is some of that guerrilla marketing we were talking about last episode,
exactly.
Right? It's a way to draw people into the game, right?
And, well, it's funny because Byron Collins, who's the publisher of the game now, Collins Epic War Games, saw this, and he saw all these people playing the game, and he came over. He didn't, he had met me, but he didn't really know me very well. And he had seen all these people playing, and so he came over to see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so I owe everything to this crazy coffee pot kit bash thing that I made. But it worked. The thing was, it worked. Like I had the game, and it wasn't just in my head anymore. And people were playing it, and they were having fun. And then there were these guys coming around, and all these guys going, "Hey, what's that? Oh, that's BattleTech. Oh, I've got those." And I'm like, "Yeah, but they're like, well, that's not BattleTech. What is that thing?"
Right.
So the idea was catching on, and then like it turns out every gaming club has at least one guy who's got a whole bunch of 6 mil.
Right.
At least one guy, but usually one guy who just won't let go of it. Like, and they all say, "Oh, we used to play that, but there's nothing to play anymore." Or they've got moderns or micro armor. Or
one guy's got it, right?
Yeah, but he's got it.
Yeah.
And because it's 6 mil, he's got like 4 or 5 armies of it because it's not that expensive.
Right.
And they were all these guys around the con going, "Oh my God, this looks like a lot of fun. Can we have a copy of it?" I'm like, "Well, it's not really ready for prime time," but it turns out it mostly was.
Nice.
And so Byron saw it, and he sent me a text not like a month or two later and said, "You ever thought about publishing it?" And I was like, "Not really. I mean, I guess it's my dream. Like I've always wanted to be a game publisher, but I had like imposter syndrome or, it's like,
right.
I'm not really a game publisher. I don't know."
Right.
So he said, "Well, why don't we'll meet up at the game store and we'll play it at Atlantis, actually in Norfolk." And so I set up a game for him, and we played one night with my couple of friends who had been playing Dystopian Wars with, actually, at the time. And he loved it. And he said, "I want to make this game." And I said, "You don't make miniatures games. Are you sure?" And he said, "Absolutely. I think, this is going to be a great project. I'm looking to branch out into other things, and I can do this." And I said, "Look, I'm not a businessman. I'm not a marketer. I don't know. All I want, I will make the game. I know how to do that, I think. But you're the one who has to sell it because I don't know how to do that. And I don't have time. I can't. I don't know how to do that." And he said, "Well, I've been selling games for, years, and I know I have suppliers and I know what to do." And so I said, "Okay, fine." And that's how we got to where we are, although that was many years ago. Since that time, I've had a child, and he's had some things come and go in his life. I mean, life did what it did, but now we're up on Kickstarter.
Great. So that's awesome. So you've got an experienced game publisher and an experienced gamer who has built essentially your dream game, right?
Yes.
So what's so give us a little bit into what the Kickstarter actually is. Now you obviously you base this game so that people can play with a variety of models they might already own, but the Kickstarter, obviously has models come with the game. So how did you finally turn it into a complete, boxed product? How'd you get there?
Well, and that right there is the difference between Byron and I. I was thinking, and this is where I think I'm glad for this opportunity. This is where I think the Kickstarter is making a difference in gaming that I hadn't thought of when I made the game. And that is, Byron looked at it and said, "Look, like I said earlier, there are plenty of guys who have, 106 mil miniatures in their closet, and they just want to bring them out and play again."
Right.
And that's all I was thinking of when I made it, because it was for me, right?
Right.
And he said, but the problem, and he and I have talked about this at length, and you guys have actually talked about this on the show before.
Right.
The gaming market is fractionalized now to the point where, especially in historicals and I think in 6 mil, it's fractured to the point where there's like 6 or 7 manufacturers who make miniatures. They don't make any rules. They don't advertise. They show up at cons and they have stalls, and people like, you guys and me and probably a lot of the listeners know who they are, but it's all word of mouth.
Right.
But they're not unified in the way that, Games Workshop is and certainly was, in the 90s, where they have this giant machine to put out IP and rules and miniatures and all the rest of it. But they can't be, and I don't think they should be, frankly. I think it's a good thing. But the problem is you can't get into it because you can't get a box of 6 mil from one man. There's not much manufacturing of one complete system. I mean, Hawk's doing it with Drop Zone Commander and now Drop Fleet Commander, but that's 10 mil, but they have they've set up this huge thing and they've done that. It occurred to me and Byron that if we could bring together all of these small manufacturers who are all making really good stuff and put them in one box with a rule set, it would allow a new gamer to go into a game store, and he's hearing this on his side from the distributors. He's tied into the distributor side and the retail, and he goes to the trade shows.
Right.
And people who do that are saying, I could sell this. If this is sitting on the shelf, it's got this great artwork, and you'd flip it over and it's like everything you need's in the box. Mm-hmm. He can sell that to somebody who might be like fed up with 40K or looks at 40K and says, I don't want to spend $400 for a game I can't even put together, but I will spend $100, or I'm looking for something different. I like science fiction, but I don't know about flying wizards and, Lord of the Rings in space. Maybe this makes more of an appeal to me. So he said, why don't we, we could I put him in touch with the manufacturers because, of course, I've been ordering from all these guys for years.
Right.
I said, let's propose it to them and see if the 6 mil manufacturers would be willing to supply us with the miniatures. We don't want to make miniatures. I don't know how to make miniatures. Byron, we could, but we certainly aren't any good at it, and that's not what we want to do. Then there are plenty of people who make very good ones. So we said, hey, you guys supply us with some of your miniatures, and we'll put together cohesive forces in this game. And we'll put them all in the box, and we'll have artwork. And that's when we spent months like combing the internet for art.
This is really a fascinating idea, Ken. So what you did, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to.
No, please.
I think this is interesting. So you went through and you kind of like looked through. Craig and I have talked about this, and Rafe's talked about this before on the show too, especially with historicals and a lot of these other games where you like the rule set, but you got to buy third-party models, and you don't know where to buy them from, and one company's got the right guy for this, and another company's got the right, you like the flyer from Company A, you like the infantry from Company B, Company C's got great tanks. And so what you've kind of done is you went through all these different manufacturers, and you picked out models from their ranges that sort of looked good together as a cohesive force and made a good looking, and you did that several times to create different factions and forces?
Well, yes and no. Yes, that's the spirit of what we've done. Now, we're learning that some people don't think they look all that cohesive. Now, right. Frankly, and I accept that. That's okay. Some people. Actually, if you looked at all the U.S. tanks that were made between 1950 and now and line them up, they don't look all that cohesive. But
right.
Part of that is on me because I should have, frankly, and I admit, should have painted all of them in a cohesive way and put them up. And we're working on that, actually, in response to that. But part of what happened is we changed, towards the end, we changed some of the arrangements we were putting on offer. So I have all these painted miniatures that we're not offering in the boxes. But that's just how it works. And I'm painting. In fact, I should be painting right now, but I'm much happier talking to you guys. So, yes, that's what we've done. And faction-wise, we've been very vague. And I say that because we're trying to deal with two different groups at the same time. The new gamer who wants a unit, cohesion, they want all of it in one box. Mm-hmm. The new gamer will pick this up and say, okay, I'm interested in this. This is a near future Earth. The UN has effectively taken over sovereignty of the Earth, except that it's sort of ruined everything, as only a giant global government can do, and the atmosphere is eroding. Earth is not going to survive, and we have to get everyone off the Earth. This is the basic storyline. The UN has the technology to do that, but in exchange for being allowed to have access to it, countries have to cede their sovereignty to the United Nations. And of course, most countries do that because they don't want to die.
Right.
A few countries don't. And as you can imagine, the United States is one of those countries that actually the government of the United States agrees to join the UN on these terms, but not all the states go along with it, as you might imagine. So the story in the box deals in this universe. But if you don't want to play that, it's fine with me. And what we want to do is open that up to allow people, one, to contribute to the story, like in a wiki. We're thinking about just making a wiki page where we create the structure of the story, and then people can, if you have some idea for a warlord who's set up camp somewhere outside of, New Hampshire, and you have a series of tanks that they've collected from various, local military, abandoned military bases, and just a ragtag bunch of people together. You can do that. There's no reason why you can't do that.
It's kind of like it sounds like it's almost like an open source universe.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
The fans can come in and add to it. Are the rules open source too, or are the rules more firm and you're trying to keep those?
The rules are not
control?
open source,
okay.
But the construction rules are. So the rules of the game will remain the rules of the game. I mean, they're not. I mean, obviously, we'll take feedback. If they don't,
you'll iterate on them and find.
Yeah,
bugs
of course. If 1 week out, everyone says, "Oh, it doesn't work."
Right.
I mean, fortunately, we've had years of playing it to refine that. But like they say, the first day of something's released is like 15 times more play testing than or maybe 100 times more play testing than could have gone into it right before that. So the rules are not open source in that way, but the construction system is, and that's the idea. The heart of the game really is for people to add whatever they want to it. In order to do that, you need the construction rules. Right. And the way we're going to do that is they'll be in the rule book. You can do it by hand, just like actually you could do in BattleTech, where you could make up your own mechs. I don't know if you guys ever did that.
Oh, yes, many times.
It's a lot of work, right?
I mean,
there's a bunch of math, and you got to figure out how much they cost. And this system allows you to do that much more quickly. And we hope to fund an online resource to let you do that, and then generate one of these combatant tiles, which you can see on the.
Yeah, I'm looking at them. They're like
beautiful little hexes.
Yeah, little hexes, and they're not too big, which is nice. They're pretty small, so you can lay them out. They've got full color artwork on them. They're great.
Yeah, they are. Thank you. We hired this guy named Bruno Wernick, who's one of the concept artists for Tron Legacy and Star Trek Into Darkness and a couple other movies. He's really good. In fact, I was like, when Byron told me that, I was like, "Are you okay?" I didn't really believe that was possible. But so he's been churning out stuff. So we made these combatant tiles. My original drafts were just rectangles, but the hexes actually work better because you can have these command structures for your units off to the side, and the one in the middle is your command unit, and the ones around it are tied to that command unit.
That's awesome. So how you arrange the tiles indicates how the units are organized.
Correct.
That's cool.
But what the online system will do is let you put in the stats. You'll just choose from little options, and I mean, I have it running on a Excel spreadsheet for me right now, but the goal is to make it a nice thing, a nice interface online, so that you can, if you have some MechWarrior clicks that's been sitting in the closet, you can pull it out, figure out what it would be in this game, type that in, click here, click there, and then even upload a picture of it, the one you painted,
right?
So that your version will have that picture. We went with the artwork because it looks much better, and it makes a nice presentation in the box set for someone who doesn't have that. We'll have artwork tiles for all of the things that come in the box.
And it looks like your artwork matches the miniatures you chose for the faction. So,
that's exactly right.
There's
In fact,
nice
we got
cohesiveness to it. Yeah.
Some of our manufacturers gave Bruno access to their 3D modeling.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Oh,
meshes or whatever they're called. I'm not. It's not my thing, but some of them I think he's had to eyeball. But several of them, I think the ones from Plasma Blast, he has the 3D. He's agreed, obviously, not to manufacture his own, but it's not his thing. So that was basically how we cobbled together this group of manufacturers who were willing to do it. Because we said, look, we'll make this wonderful artwork for you. We will expose people to your product. And we've had people say, oh, well, can we get these miniatures? How do we get these miniatures? And we've been very open. We said, look, you can go order them.
Right.
But, one, you're going to get more in a discount in this box, and it'll all be in a coherent set.
Very cool.
We're not trying to compete with the miniatures manufacturers.
Yeah, you're really here to it's a really interesting idea, Ken. I've read through the Kickstarter, but I don't think some of the really interesting sort of the inspiration for this really comes through. That it's sort of this. I think it's interesting that you've got a cohesive universe you can play in with background. Fans can extend the universe, so I'm sure over time, if you get some traction, will eventually become, with this really unique, with its own little nooks and crannies that everybody creates in it. And then you've also got this really rule set that you've been playing, with you and a lot of different miniature gamers who are involved in a lot of games for a long time now, for many years now, and it's been refined quite a bit. and it's really designed to work with just about any, the 6 mil stuff out there today, which is pretty amazing. Do the rules have it sounds like it kind of has its roots in sort of the more historical or earlier GW games, in that it's really designed for more casual play. Have you thought about, how tight the rules are? Are you really thinking this is just a casual game? Don't freak out if a couple things come into question, or have you really tried to tighten this up? Or where do you feel like this game goes in the casual versus competitive spectrum?
Yeah, it's funny. I have always been much more. My personal style is to tend towards like the British style of gaming, which seems to be like have a club night and make up a scenario or something and play it out. And if it's fun, if you get hosed, you get hosed, but you had fun.
Right.
That said, I live in America and I'm not blind, and I enjoy winning things. And so I think it's funny. I did not intend the game to be competitive when I designed it. I think if I get the point system right, it could be. But I do think it does. I'm convinced that someone with a Matrix gamer, to use the D6G lingo, could break this game pretty. I mean, I think you could do it. I mean, I'm not sure it would even be that hard for like a hardcore 40K tournament player. I have some math background, but not enough of one to like Matrix gamer proof the game,
right?
Because the system is so open. I mean, you have 5 size categories. I don't know how many different weapon. There are 5 classes of like 10 or 12 different types of weapon systems. When you just those combinations, and then there's like 5 amounts of armor of 3 or 4 different kinds, and then there's 3 or 4 psychological profiles. I mean, when you come up with that many variables, the number of variable units is in the hundreds of thousands. And to say that, one stand of infantry armed with pistols is worth, 1 point, and one skyscraper-sized, walker is worth, 1,100 points or whatever. I don't know. I mean, would someone build an army of 1,100 infantry units? Maybe. I'm sure if they thought it would win a tournament, they would. And I don't enjoy playing with people like that, but plenty of people do and are willing to do it. So I think, I actually have, I'm sure Byron will cut it out, but my current draft has a little intro, like my, what does Privateer call it? Page 5 or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have a little thing in there like that, but basically, well, I'll just read it to you.
Go for it.
Well, I won't read the whole thing because it's long, but basically there's a point in the middle of it where I say, this is a game. Game. Spell it 1 letter at a time if you have to. It's not a job. It's not an argument. It's a game. Even if you're playing a tournament of some kind, it's still a game. Never forget that. Roll some dice and get on with it. If losing a game of miniature sci-fi tank battles is the worst thing to happen to you today, then you've had a pretty good day now, haven't you? So there's that kind of spirit.
That's good. That's cool.
It might not make Adepticon.
Well, no, I think that's right. I think it's, there's different people like different things out of their games, and I think I'm just listening to how you built the game, my guess would be that if you took out the ability to create your own units and lock the game down to fixed choices from the book, you probably could make something very balanced. But as soon as you open up the world to people creating their own stuff, any formula you build is going to have there's going to be some, trick to the formula that breaks it. Like I remember in BattleTech, you could arm a mech with lots and lots of little guns, and luck you just get lucky critical hits, and it kind of breaks the game.
Yeah,
in sort of a fun, exciting way, but still sort of breaks it.
Well, it's the problem with point systems in general. I mean, first of all, there's no, even if every Abrams tank is worth 10 points, just because we all know what that is, 3 Abrams tanks is worth 30 points. But in reality, 3 Abrams tanks might actually be worth more than 30 points.
There's a force multiplier there.
Right, there's force multiplication. There's all kinds of things that go into that. So especially, and then you put three tanks with an infantry platoon. The combination of those two things is worth far more than the points would tell you.
It actually always blows me away that some of these game companies get pretty good balance in some of their games. It's really hard to do.
But I've come up. I think the limitation of the hex tiles makes that work better.
Cool.
And I have some limitations on the number of things you can put on it. Like one unit, you can't spam a unit with 100 guys.
Right.
There's some limitations in there for that, and that does help. But
That's good.
it's just I think it's basically impossible.
But it sounds like the game's roots are really in the more casual and sort of, you can dream it, you can play it sort of
Yes.
world, which definitely has a, if you look at something like an Age of Sigmar, which seems to be doing pretty well in certain circles, that depends on the circle. But yeah, people like that stuff.
Yeah, I have to admit, I will freely admit, I bought Age of Sigmar and I read it and I went, "This is really cool."
Yeah,
but I also read it and went, "This is going to infuriate a whole lot of people."
Right. So to really though to appeal to the folks who like the more casual game, generally those folks also like really rich, story-filled, asymmetric scenarios. Do you have any of that in the core set?
There will be, yes. The game is going to come with scenarios because the game comes with forces that are set up, so we know what they are. I can balance those and stat them out in a way, and there will be there will be, I think, at least 6 scenarios in the game, and I might string them together. I haven't finished that section, frankly, because we've tinkered with the balance because, as you might imagine, coming up with the cost of figuring out which miniatures to include from 5 different miniatures manufacturers is not the easiest thing to do. And I went back and forth with Byron because I'm the one sending him the lists and saying, these are the forces I want in the game. And he's the one going, yeah, I'm the one who has to pay for these.
Right.
So we're, for example, at one point I had there's this giant walker from Dark Realm called the Majestic. It's basically like a warlord-sized Titan. But they're like $60 a piece. Those are not going in the game.
Nice.
But they're on the box cover. There's one on the box cover. It's gorgeous.
So it sounds cool, Ken. So if people want to check this out on Kickstarter, they search for Polyversal?
Yep. It's called Polyversal 6mm miniatures game system on Kickstarter. We also have a website. It's polyversal-game.com.
And how long is the Kickstarter going, Ken?
So the Kickstarter, we ran the Kickstarter for 60 days, which is weird because that seems to make people mad. I don't.
Kickstarter's a strange place.
I'm learning. Byron has had several successful Kickstarters with his company for World War II stuff, card games and a board game. But this one we're learning some things. Plus, we have obviously a unique concept that I think, Russ, you're right. I'm not sure people get. I don't think you can get from reading it what I'm getting at. But we're hoping people catch on, and I'm really glad to be able to talk about it. It runs, today is March the 2nd that we're recording this, so it will 24 more days from today. So March 26th it ends. No, I'm sorry, it says March 27th. It actually says on here March 27th.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
At 12:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's been running now for just over 30 days, and we're at about 35%. There's one guy, it's funny, there's one guy who keeps pledging and unpledging. It goes up and down every day, like by $100 and some because he changes his mind constantly. I didn't realize, Byron told me this, I'm not the creator of it on the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
And I've backed out of Kickstarters before, but I didn't realize that the people running the Kickstarter could see who you were and how much you pulled out.
That's kind of funny.
But we don't have anyone like pranking. I mean, we've got a great group. We're up to 220 backers right now. We need a lot more than that. I freely admit that we may not make it. I've learned a lot. I remember listening to Rick Priestley talk about it, actually on your show, and the idea that I'm even sitting in the same chair that Rick Priestley was sitting in is crazy to me.
He spilled some tea on the left-hand side there.
I see that.
Sure
we'll take that up.
All right.
I think I stained my suit. Maybe I can get something from Warlord.
I'm sure you can sue him for a little bit. Maybe a free starter box or something.
Also, was I not supposed to wear a suit to this?
Yeah, you don't have to.
You can wait. Well, you're a lawyer, so it's kind of like how you wake up in the
That's a prank we play on the first timers. We tell you to wear a suit, but after the second visit,
I had black tie too. So we're running 24. We're running till March 27th in the middle of the day, and people have balked at it a little bit and said, "Well, that's a lot of money." And one thing I think people need to hear, I needed to hear it, frankly, because I'm a big fan of Cool Mini or Not Kickstarters, and the ones from Mantic too. We are not those companies. Right. I mean, I'm actually. This is Byron's company, Collins Epic War Games. It's Byron Collins. He's not in a big office building with a dozen people in a warehouse, and he's one guy, and I'm one guy, and we both have jobs, and we are very much committed to this. but we cannot possibly set up a Kickstarter that will fund at $5,000 and then promise, stretch goals for every $10,000 after that. And that's because we've seen, both of us, and he has several friends who have done it. Kickstarters get to $6,000 and then fund. But the problem is the company cannot afford to produce what they've promised to produce for that price. Right. And they thought that it was going to take off. And so what he's done is price it honestly. And it may just be that Kickstarter no longer supports that model because, and Rick Priestley was talking about this. He was saying, like, we were proposing a system that wasn't yet done. And I think we did learn from that because this is a system that is done. Right. And we're not trying to.
It's also, even $80,000 is a lot, but it's a fraction of what Beyond the Gates of Antares was.
Well, that's true. And it's funny. I said the same thing when Byron told me. I said, that's a lot. And he goes, it's not a lot. And he showed me, when you think about,
I have no doubt that it makes sense.
When you think about one, we have to import all this lead and put it into boxes and then send it back out. Yeah. And the other thing I'm embarrassed I haven't mentioned yet is one of the other components we've included in this are these buildings.
Yeah, the terrain looks awesome.
The buildings are beautiful.
Yeah.
That's another company. The Phalanx Consortium is another company here in Virginia. It's one guy, and maybe two guys, but it's basically it's not a big company, and they do a game called Skirmish Sanguine. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a modern, like Day of the Ranger kind of stuff.
Yeah, and.
But these buildings, when Byron first showed me what they were proposing to make, I said, that's impossible. I mean, okay, it might be possible, but those are going to be like $600 a piece. These buildings are huge. I mean, they are skyscrapers. They're feet high. Yeah, they're not small.
No, they're enormous.
And then I thought, well, they must be made of some giant, resin. They're made out of extruded. It's like, I forgot what he called it, self-sealing foam. So they're actually lightweight. They're really lightweight. Wow. It's a type of styrofoam that has like a membrane that it automatically forms around it when they cast it. So it takes paint really well, and it's almost indestructible.
Wow.
He said that he discovered it. There was a company that used to have the process, and I think he bought the line from them. But, you have all these buildings, and you can just throw them in a box, and they'll rattle around, but they won't damage each other because they're so light. So they're great for taking to cons and stuff, and they don't weigh a whole lot. So we can make these giant. In fact, they fit just into the limitations of his 3D printer. He's designed them, he 3D prints them, and then he puts them into the molds to make the foam versions.
That's awesome. I think those buildings are worth the price of admission. Honestly,
the buildings are great, and they're not cheap. They're centerpiece models. I mean, we understand. Not everybody.
I would say they are. I mean, they're not cheap at all. They're very affordable
for what. For what they are, they're a good deal.
It's crazy.
And I've seen them. They are. And Byron's been working on a few of the prototypes. He's got on display at cons, and there's some pictures on here where he's painted them up. And we haven't even finished making. There's some that are still drawings, but he can make. I mean, I've seen the stuff. It can be done, and I didn't believe it when I first saw it. So. I understand if you're looking at it and thinking that's just not possible. It very much is possible, and we'd love to add them because having a giant cityscape is just really cool.
It is really cool, especially for a game like this. It looks great, and it looks much cooler than. I mean, the cardboard is the other answer to that, and that works. But this looks even more.
It's the build, awesome. Yeah. And I'm on the Phalanx Consortium's Facebook page. I'm noticing they're going to be at Adepticon. Are they going to have any of these buildings there to look at?
They are now. I did not realize that, but I will. Yeah, I hope they will.
Excellent. Well, Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to fill us in on Polyversal. And if people want to know more, head on over to Kickstarter and search for Polyversal. It spells just like it sounds, which is why it's one of the few words I can pronounce, which is exciting. so
I changed it from multiversal. It used to be multiversal.
Multiversal. I like Poly. Poly's just, I don't know, it's got a certain ring
me
to
too.
it. Good stuff. And it sounds really cool, Ken. It's definitely a very interesting idea. I hope people get into it. It sounds like you guys are really using Kickstarter as it was intended, which is not so much a pre-order system for existing companies, but a way to try sort of a crazy and unique idea. And if people like it, they can make it happen. And
it is, and we're using it to build a community. Yeah. And if it doesn't fund, it's not a failure. I think people also have to get that through their heads. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't fund, a failure would be if we made it and it didn't sell.
Right.
we're learning. If the first one doesn't work, we're committed to making this thing, and we're going to learn from it. So if you're looking at it and going, I don't know, put in $1 and tell us why not, or tell us why. I mean, I'm fine with that. If it gets to be the end of this thing and we're way down, we want to know, because there are a lot of people who really do want to see this thing made, and we want to do it the right way. And we understand that the Kickstarter is it's a variable system, but we've set it so that if it funds, it will be very good. If it doesn't, we'll make it very good.
Right. Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Ken. We're going to take a quick break here from Hollywood and Total Fangirl. We'll be back in a bit with an exciting game review.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. Our shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. Speaking of shows, there are a couple of programs that we try to watch all the time that we're really regular viewers of, even if it means that we're sometimes mainlining 5 episodes at once, just because we lose track of things in the busyness of life. One of those shows is Arrow, and another one of those shows is Flash. And the thing was, we started watching Arrow when that came out, and it came out first, and I liked it initially, and then it lost me. I stopped watching it, and I thought, I don't want to watch this anymore. Despite having people tell me, you got to give it another chance. This season's better. This character's changed. This is better than it was. You should watch it again. Well, eventually Flash came out, and I really liked Flash, but they had that whole crossover thing happening, and then I thought, well, now I feel like I'm not going to get it because I'm not watching Arrow. And what if there's some cool thing that I don't get because I didn't watch the other show? I knew it wasn't enough that I wouldn't understand what was happening, but that I don't want to miss, like, the joke, Like, you want to know the joke or the inside scoop when you see a character, see a setting, and you think, oh, that was what they did on the other show. So we started watching Arrow, and I thought, okay, I'm actually kind of back into it. All right, so we were watching Arrow, and we were watching Flash, and somehow this season, and I think we're almost caught up, so maybe I'm a couple episodes behind from today's date on Arrow, but I started realizing I wasn't really watching Arrow and enjoying it. Like, I almost was like a chore. Okay, we got to watch this. And we were flipping back and forth, so we were staying current, like watch Flash, and then we watch Arrow, then we watch Flash, then we watch Arrow, to go back and forth. So if there was some kind of crossover, it wouldn't be a situation where we suddenly jumped 5 episodes ahead in one and we're 5 episodes off in the other, and then the whole crossover thing wouldn't make any sense. The other night I was thinking about it, and I thought, gosh, as much as I like both those shows, and as much as I want to be sort of a completist and see everything and not miss the joke, if there is one, when the 2 shows cross over, my time was too precious. And I suddenly thought, I can't just be spending all this time watching a show that I'm only watching so that I maybe get 1 minute of another show is slightly more interesting or funny because I've watched every episode of this other one. So I have given up. And so is Russ on Arrow. We have stopped watching officially. And it always feels a little painful when you stop watching a show that you're really into. You feel like, it's like breaking up. You're like, I really liked him once, but now he's kind of a jerk and he's boring and I don't like hanging out with him. So now we're done. Well, that's how we are with Arrow. So I've officially given up on Arrow, but I have not given up on Flash. I really enjoy it, and there's some neat, fun stuff happening this season, and I'm curious to see where it goes. And it was sort of liberating now that I have broken up with Arrow. I feel like, okay, that was the right thing to do, because I'm not missing it. I'm not wishing that I saw it, and I'm not wondering what happened. I could care less to what everybody does in that city. I can't remember. I think they changed the name of the city. Star City, Starling City. See, that's how confused I am. I'm not even paying attention to everything. So that's it. I finally decided to give up on a show that I felt like I had to watch to be a completist. And I'm wondering if anybody else ever does the same thing. It's hard to break up with a show you love, but sometimes it needs to be done.
Hey, you know what that sound means? That's time for our friend Vic the Vikings in his house from our friends at thewarstore.com.
bringing the war to your door for way over a decade and more now.
Indeed it is. Craig, the first thing you're going to notice over the War Store, if you've been there a little bit, is the brand new website look.
Brand new website. They got scrolling headers. They've got tabs now for fantasy, historical, sci-fi, steampunk, and collectible miniatures.
It's so
and then
easy.
Across the top, you've got all your board games and your dice and your tool. Everything is consolidated into its own category now.
It's much easier to see the broad categories there for all your great miniature games. Of course, they carry board games too, but really what you're looking at here is their fantastic miniature gaming selection. It is really unparalleled. Every game you want to know about. And again, what makes the War Store so awesome is not only their fantastic prices, some of the best you will find on the internet. My brother was just looking for some stuff for his kids, and I directed him right here because the War Store's got all the best stuff at great prices and everything he was looking for, everything he needed. Some of it very common, some of it more obscure. It was all right there. One place to go.
One-stop shop.
One-stop shop, whether it's paints, models, brushes, primer, you name it, they've got it over at thewarstore.com.
They've got it.
I'm Rafe Hollywood Granger, and this is the Hollywood Minute.
Welcome back to another rendition of the Hollywood Minute. I'm your host, Rafe Hollywood Granger. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter over there on the D6G Hollywood on the Twitter. Or if you want to follow me on my work Twitter, that is Rafe Granger. So I'm just recording this one. I wasn't happy, and Russ wasn't happy with the audio quality of using my Logitech USB microphone and camera. And, the amount of downloads for the camera, it was a fun experiment, is not that big. So I thought, what the heck, let me just go back to doing it audio, and we'll see how I like it. I still have this dream one day of getting the Hollywood Minutes all kind of synced together, 10 in a row, and then uploading them as a podcast, but that's kind of lower down on my to-do list, I guess. Today, I want to talk to you about some MMOs. So, some friends of mine, Ryan and Greg, I think Christian too, are playing an MMO called Black Desert. It came at a time when I was really looking to get involved in a new MMO, so part of me is really bummed that I decided not to jump on board because of what I'm going to talk about later. But those three guys seem to be having a good time with it, and I do miss that kind of gameplay. But I decided to go in for Tom Clancy's The Division. I'm a huge Tom Clancy fan to begin with. I like Rainbow Six games. I like, quote, slower shooters, end quote. And so far, I've been really happy with The Division. I like the setting. The setting is in New York, and the premise of the story is that their terrorists have crippled New York, and I can't even tell if it's the rest of the country, by putting smallpox on dollar bills on money and then disseminating that during Black Friday right before the holidays. My understanding is this plot is actually a real plot developed by the government when they the government didn't develop the plot, the writers did, but I hear through the grapevine that the government back towards 9/11 and the terrorist attacks had asked writers to come up with scenarios so that the government could be prepared, and that this was one of the scenarios as presented by Tom Clancy, I believe. I'm not sure if Tom Clancy wrote it back in the day or if maybe he just found out about it and is the publisher of it. But that's the premise, is it's actually based on a government inquiry for possible terrorist attacks that would cripple the government, and that's what the gameplay is about. I've never played an MMO shooter before. I did not play Destiny, and so I was really looking forward to seeing what that would be like. How do you create a character and sort of live and breathe this character and want to do upgrades and crafting? And I've been really pleasantly surprised. It's simple enough for me to understand. It's different enough to be a new experience. You have your weapons that you can upgrade. You have skills that you can unlock and upgrade. You have this base of operations that you can unlock and upgrade, all pursuant to your desires. You do that by solving main mission and getting these different medical points or tech points or security points that you then use to unlock your base. When that happens, it lets you unlock different skills, and along with those skills, it even lets you modify those skills, which is really pretty cool. So far, just Andy and I have been running around in game. Dave wants to play, but he's redoing his basement, so he hasn't hooked up his Xbox yet. It's been fun playing with Andy. The missions are tough, challenging, and it's really good. And the matchmaking's good. I played with a couple strangers, and it worked out just fine. So I really recommend you guys if you like MMOs and you like Tom Clancy games, it's a no-brainer. The other thing I like is for these little fluff elements. They have these things called echoes, where you're running through the city, and then you'll stand there and you'll kind of download in this like ghosted out scenario these little scenes of what happened either right before the plague hit or the first few weeks of the plague, and that's really cool. And then there's other things you can collect, which are people's cell phones, and they just kind of are real lives, people living out their lives during either right before or during when the plague hit. The other thing you can do is you're part of this crew called the Division, which is a sleeper cell of agents, United States governmental agents out of Homeland Security that are specifically designed to operate should the government be decapitated. So the Division is the controlling agents in the field, and they kind of land into New York, and the first wave of agents are completely gone, and you don't know why. You're in the second wave of agents, and again, you're tasked with bringing the city and protecting the civilization to make sure civilization survives. So that's a really cool concept too. Tom Clancy's usually so accurate with stuff that I now don't doubt that there are real, quote, Division agents that are sleeper agents out there. There's a lot of other little things that you can hunt and find that unlock the story too, so that's really pretty cool. The other game that came out that I really liked and have zero time for is Far Cry Primal, and Andy bought that game, and I got to see that for like an hour, and that was super cool. And lastly, on the miniature game front, really looking forward to it. By the time you hear this, I will have played a small skirmish battle with Andy back at Flames of War. Really looking forward to getting that game back on the table, and we'll be playing that over at Adler Hodley, which is renowned for its really nice gaming tables. So that's what I'm doing in my neck of the woods. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Looking forward to talking to you next time. Again, if you want to follow me, the best place is the D6G on Twitter. Or if you want to follow me work-related and see what I'm doing in my work life, see the videos that I'm putting out over there, and the work that I'm doing on that side, then that's over at Rafe Granger on Twitter. Other than that, talk to you soon, and happy gaming.
Hey, welcome back. And so, as you know, we have Ken Whitehurst on the show with us, and he's great with music. And so, what better than to review a game that's got songbirds in it? I did that. I tied that all together.
Weak, dude.
No,
weak.
come on. Please.
Weak.
That's a professional segue right there.
Okay.
So we're going to review. Nice.
All right, good.
See,
Well
there
done,
we go.
Ken. There you go.
Tailfeathers from Plaid Hat Games that Russ, you heard Russ talk about this a while back when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been having it on the back burner, and now we've moved it to the front burner in a cool metaphorical way, not in a way where we are cooking mice and or birds.
Right. No birds were harmed in the making of this game review.
That's true.
So it hasn't even been out that long. It came out in December of 2015, so just a few short months ago.
It feels like it's been out for a long
I know.
time.
Oh,
well,
is that right?
They had previews of it at Gen Con.
I remember because you got it.
Yes.
For Christmas for one of your girls.
I did. I was trying to get it. Came out literally the first couple weeks in December, and I was trying to get it in time for Christmas. So
I remember now.
So it just came out, and by, of course, our friends at Plaid Hat Games. Jerry Hawthorne is the designer. He's the same guy who did Mice and Mystics. So
Which makes sense.
Takes place in the same universe, same great models. And I would say the high-level description of this, it's Redwall-style miniatures combat amongst the treetops, really, is what you're doing here. So there are some units on the guys on the ground, but of course the stars of the show are the birds who are being ridden by mice and rats. Mm-hmm. The suggested retail price for this game is $69.95, and we'll go through what's in the box in a minute and decide if it's worth it or not. But first, Craig, can you give us a dramatic... Actually, Ken, how's your dramatic reading, Ken?
I've been known to be dramatic.
All right, Ken.
There you go.
Why don't you give us a dramatic reading of the game description as the manufacturer describes it?
Okay. Villainous rats have allied with vicious hunting birds to pillage the humble mouse settlement across Meanderfield. But look, Brave mice, mounted on starlings and blue jays, swoop in to wage war against the evil alliance. The Downwood Militia soars into action against the Vermin Raiders. Featuring the beautiful hand-sculpted miniatures by Chad Herverter, Mice and Mystics fans have come to love. Tailfeathers raises the stakes with 13 dutiful ground troops, 5 headstrong birds that tilt for launching and turning, plus 5 daring pilots. Players will recreate the famous battles for aerial supremacy that shaped the Mice and Mystics world.
Ken, that was quite professional, sir. I
Very
love that.
nice.
Very good dramatic pauses in there as well. So good stuff. So that's the game, man. Let's dive into what's in the box here. So, Craig, what does it sound like when you open a box full of mice and songbirds?
Oh, ready for this?
Yeah. All right, excellent. They do escape, so you got to kind of watch it.
Yeah. You don't want these birds to escape. Then what is the point of tail feathers? If you're not careful, you open the box and all you've got are tail feathers in it.
Right. So the game box is full of stuff, actually. It's quite packed. You're going to get 2 books, 1 rule book, and 1 scenario book. And those familiar with Mice and Mystics will not be surprised to find tons of great artworks, fluff, and theming right in these books. I mean, as soon as you open them, you feel like you're reading a story, whether it's the rule book or the scenario book. So the game is very much has the flavor of, while it is a quote-unquote board game, it's very much a miniature game on a board. It's as much a board game as X-Wing is. In other words, you're really playing a miniature game in a box. You're going to get lots of action dice, which are these custom dice, D6s that have special symbols on them. You're going to get a bunch of cards. Most of the cards are unit cards. These are the cards you're going to have in front of you that describe the stats of the various units you are commanding. You're going to get 60 action cards. These are more of an advanced rule, but I highly recommend. Craig, have you tried the action cards yet?
No.
They add a lot to the game, but I think for younger players, you can leave them out. What's great about this game is I think it scales really well for the gamer in you, but it also is great to play with younger players. You can just phase rules out very simply and still have a really fun battle.
Yeah.
You do get 12 objective cards, which add a little more depth to the game. You do get, as mentioned in the dramatic reading there by Ken, you do get 23 plastic figures, of which 5 of them are birds, which are pretty good sized miniatures.
Yeah, they're big.
They're big. You do get 5 of these plastic flight bases for the birds, which are ball and socket, so the birds can be tilted.
In fact, that's part of the game.
And there's a game mechanic centered around it, so it's not only for cool looks, it's also important. You also get this cool plastic rangefinder. It's a plastic, it looks for all the world like a plastic twig with one end of it wrapped, and it's very clever. It calls to be, actually all this stuff calls to be painted up, really. But the range measuring thing actually looks like a twig. And the wrapped end of it actually is how you determine short range. And if you're in the unwrapped part of the twig, you're at long range for activities. You got these 4 really cool, I think, what they call tree overlays, which are really these, how the game board is set up is there's 4 like quarter. If you imagine a tree looking down from the top and chopping the tree off at the trunk and looking down at the trunk and taking a quarter of that circle and having branches coming out of it, you take 4 of these and put them in the 4 corners of your table, and it defines the table. So you're basically doing battle between 4 trees with their branches sticking out. So there's places that the mice can walk on the trees. And the way these are lined up is great. Very much like Mice and Mystics, the trees are segmented in such a way with stripped areas and bark areas and some areas with moss that these define the spaces the mice can move on when you're counting spaces. But the artwork is done in such a way you don't see spaces that when you look at it, you see tree trunks, which is pretty cool. Much like in Mice and Mystics, the stones in the dungeon define the places you can step, right? It's that same sort of look and feel. So the art and the graphic design is really, really beautiful. You also get this sapling. Some of the missions have a center tree that gets in the way. You get these really cool 8 leaves. So what you do is when you set your trees up, there's also these little notches in the branches. And there are these 8 nice, thick, full color game piece style leaves that can kind of slide into those little notches, and it's where the leaves are hanging on the tree. And during the course of the game, the mice can hop on the leaves detach and sort of spin across the table. And so you can have these battles where there's birds flying around, there's mice standing on the leaves, sort of like imagine surfing in the air. It's sort of this crazy over the top thing, but it's really very, very clever. You also get 2 big nests that are also cardstock that you can place them in different places in the trees. Those usually end up being the bases. And you have these 2 nest dials that are sort of Fantasy Flight-like, that you can dial up the wounds remaining on your nest. So most nests start with a certain number of wounds. And in many of the missions, the job is to damage the nest or kill the nest in addition to any other mission objectives as well. So, Craig, what were your thoughts on the components as you looked through this stuff?
Really beautiful. The models are great. The detail is really cool and crisp. You've got like all these noble-looking little mice and all these evil-looking rats, which I think is probably stereotypical. And I don't think Zootopia would approve, but
Right.
it looked cool.
Right.
And the birds look fantastic. The rat birds look all ratty, and the mouse birds, of course, look all noble. Again, stereotyping.
Yep.
Rodent stereotyping.
And there's little bits of armor and stuff too. So right, so like the rats have put some spiked armor on their ravens, and the mice have more noble sort of like barding you'd expect on a paladin's warhorse kind of thing. And so there's definitely a look going on, but there's also armoring and everything. So it does have that very much sort of a Redwall feel, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was very surprised to see the price because you get a lot in that box.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, you were going through the list that I'd seen the pictures online, and for that price, it is kind of amazing they can squeeze all that in there. And everything I've heard about Mice and Mystics, if it's at that level of quality, then it's going to be good.
Yeah. And I think it's very cool that you can play with all your Mice and Mystics models in this game. I think that's very cool.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so they come with, the game includes unit cards for all the Mice and Mystic hero models. And so they can cross over then and join your ground forces if you'd like, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's cool.
And some of the stories connect too, which is pretty neat. So that's what's in the box. I agree. I think the value is fantastic, especially when you compare it to other miniature board games in a box. And I think they could easily have charged $80 or $90 for this. So the fact that you can get it for $70 makes it feel like really, really quite a deal. Yeah. It's also great because if you have 2 copies of the game, there are scenarios you can download from the website to play 4-player variants. So it's nice that the price point is reasonable. So if you and your friends both pick it up, you can do a lot even more with the game. All right. So how do we play? That's what's in the box. A lot of good stuff. What does it play like? Let's talk about setup real quick here. So first of all, you are going to want to pick your scenario. So you go through the scenario book to find the mission you want to play. What I like about the game is it's got something for everyone. So if you are more of a board gamer and you just want to be told, what should I break out of the box? What should I set up? How do I play? The missions all have 2 formats. So first of all, the missions can all be one-offs, but there's also a campaign mode that your characters level up through. Many of the characters, by the way, have multiple versions of themselves in the deck, and they start out as lower level and can raise up. And so there's ways you can do that in the mission if you play the campaign mode. Or you could choose not to do that and just play one of their one-offs. Also, when you're picking the forces, each mission tells you a sort of static list of forces you can play with, but also there are point values listed that all the cards have, and so you can either use the standard forces indicated in the scenario book, or you can be more of a miniature gamer and build your own army exactly how you want to. And assuming you have more sets and other options, or if expansions come out and other things, you'll be able to mix and match and do more, but still play the same scenarios you have, which is pretty nice. So what you're going to do is pick your scenario, lay the table out based on the mission book, how it shows what goes where. You can use those recommended forces or build your own. Then you're going to have to assemble the riders, because one of the cool things about the game is that the rider models, the mice riders and the rat riders, detach and pop off from their respective birds. And so you can actually mix and match the riders with the birds, and the bird cards and rider cards are separate with separate point values. So you can determine who's riding what, and when you then decide who's going to ride which bird, you put the rider card and the bird card together, and they sort of form a longer card to tell you that that's actually the unit during the course of the game. So once you decide that during the game, they won't separate. But I like that you can mix and match the models while you're figuring out your list design.
Yep.
So that's pretty cool. Then your play area, you're going to need about a 3-foot by 3-foot area. Some of the missions are 32 inches square, some of them are 36. But if you give yourself 3-foot space, 4 foot by 3 might be ideal, so give yourself a little bit of sideboard there. So you do need a little bit of space to play this.
Yeah.
You're then going to put the nests and the dials out where they go in the trees, and that's all usually in the rule book. You're going to have to set up a sideboard. So in the game, there's a sideboard for each player. These sideboards have a little spot for the cheese wheel. Those familiar with Mice and Mystic will remember the cheese wheel, which is just it looks like a pizza with a bunch of empty slices. And there are also these cheese tokens. And as you do things during the game, you're going to accumulate cheese, and you're going to put them in the cheese wheel, and the cheese wheel is full, but special things happen. The sideboard also includes a quick reference card built into it for the phases of the game, as well as some spaces there for some reserves and also folks who are assigned to a mission. More about that a little later. And then you're going to deploy your forces, which basically means putting your birds and your mice into your home tree. So each side has a tree with a nest in it. That's where you start. You're going to put all your forces there, and you're going to tilt your birds sort of backwards like they're ready to take off. Yeah. Because you're going to want to be in takeoff position for that. And when you're putting your birds in your tree, make sure you pay close attention to which way it's facing, because you can't just turn your bird willy-nilly. You have to sort of follow this flight planning thing that we're all sort of familiar with now from games like X-Wing and Attack Wing and other games like that where you're planning your movement. So this game's got that element. So when you're flying your birds around, you are doing plotted flight movement and not just zipping things all over the place. Right. So setup was pretty quick, Craig, right? Did you find anything? Was it pretty straightforward for a game this complex?
When I was setting up, when it was just recent, I could get the whole game set up in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's great.
From the box to everything laid out on the table in 10 or less.
Nice.
Yeah.
So once you're set up, it's pretty much ready to start. There are 4 main phases. So how are you doing, Ken? Everything making sense so far?
I'm actually looking ahead on your bullets, and you've said there are 4 main phases, but it looks like I see all these bullet points. They're like 6 or 7 bullet points.
Yes, don't be confused by the bullets. They are complicated, but stick with me here.
The only thing that confuses me is that you said this is a battle between birds flying between treetops, but you have ground forces. Where are the ground forces?
Excellent question.
Ah, interesting question.
I'm glad you brought that up. So when you're deploying your units, the thing that's interesting about the game is you're going to put these 4 trees in the corner of the play area, right?
Right.
And it's important to remember, and it's hard to visualize, but the trees, if you imagine looking down at a tree trunk with branches coming out of cardboard, so the tree corner has all these branches sticking out and the trunk. The trunk's impassable terrain, but the branches all have spaces on it for ground forces to move around. So the ground forces can walk on the branches, and the branches are all connected in ways they can move from one branch to another.
The term ground is used loosely.
I would say people who can't fly.
They're tree forces.
Yeah, tree forces.
Okay.
So you can't actually put your ground forces on where you kind of can abstractly put them on the ground, but they're not really ever on the ground. So they're either in the tree you have, or they're in one of the other trees in one of the 4 corners, or they are on your sideboard in the mission area. And more about that in a second. So your ground forces. Now, there's other ways ground forces can get across the table. They can jump on those leaves I mentioned and fly across on the leaves.
Right.
Or birds can actually pick up and transport models as well. Or they can go on missions, which basically means they're abstractly running along the ground between the trees. And if they can make it through a turn without their mission going sour, they can then pop up in another tree. So that's one of the ways you can do it. More about that in a second.
Cool.
So, so there's all kinds of ways you can get across the table. And don't forget, some of these ground forces, many of them are wielding swords, but some of them have crossbows or bows. So you can also have them standing in your tree trying to shoot at the birds that are getting too near your nest, all that kind of stuff.
Right, as mice do.
As mice do.
They are.
And rats, yes. So here we go. So what are the 4 phases? Well, first there's the mission phase. Then there's the tilt phase, the activation phase, and the final phase. Okay, so these are pretty simple. So first there's the mission phase. Now this gets to what Ken's first question is. So one of the neat things about the game is that each side has these 4 sort of oval-shaped, what we call mission cards. And on the back...
Six.
Thank you. 6 oval-shaped mission cards. And on the back of these mission cards, they just say the word mission, and it's sort of an aerial view of either mice or rats running along the ground. So it's like a picture what you'd imagine if you were flying like 20 or 30 feet in the air looking down at rat and mice running along on the ground. But on the other side of these cards are different missions. And the backs are all the same, though, except there's a set of cards for the mice team and a set of cards for the rat team. So each side now is going to secretly pick one of their mission cards. They're going to put it face down near the center of the table. It's actually within the center of the table is marked with a little token. And each side's got to put their mission card within short range of the center of the board, which, again, is that little wrapped section of the rangefinder. And where this goes actually kind of matters, so more about that in a second. So if Craig and I are doing battle and I'm the rats and he's the mice, he's going to pick one of his mice missions to do. Now, all of our missions are identical in terms of the choice we have. We can either run a decoy mission, an intercept mission, a siege mission, a patrol mission, a rescue mission, or a special mission. So real quick, these are simple. The decoy mission means you're basically doing nothing and you're just pretending you're doing a mission, okay? The intercept mission is you're going to send your ground forces out onto the ground, metaphorically here, and they are going to attempt to stop the other player's mission trying to go. All right. The siege mission means you're sending your ground forces out across the battlefield, and at the end of the turn, they're going to come up in one of the other trees. And the patrol mission means the forces are going to go out on the ground and try to shoot down any birds that are over their head, or flying units. And the rescue mission means your forces are going to go out and they're going to try to recover one of your lost birds and riders.
Yeah. So because this is a children's game, nobody ever dies.
Right. So what you do when you pick this mission is I'm going to put a mission face down, and I'm going to take some of the ground forces, up to 4 of them, from my tree, and I'm going to put them on my mission side card that says mission. And so what Craig basically knows is I've locked in some mission and I've committed some number of ground forces to the mission.
And it's a cool mechanic because you both choose your missions and you don't know what each other's missions are. But then you alternate back and forth, starting with the player who does not have initiative that turn, placing one model in that little place on your card. So you're kind of like building up your forces. It's kind of like a little Cold War moment.
Right.
Like, I'm putting one mouse on mine. Oh, well, then I'll put one rat on mine. Well, I'm going to put another mouse on mine. Well, I'm going to put another rat. And you put up to 4 models, send them off on a mission.
And both sides have access to ground units that are simply like grunts. So one card represents, 3 or 5 or 6 guys, and you have actual plastic models for the 6 guys, but they're all one wound easy to kill dudes.
Yeah.
But also both sides have access to ground-based heroes, and those heroes are multi-wound guys who have all kinds of cool special rules. And so Craig might put like 2 of his regular guys on there. I'm like, okay, well, I'll put one of my heroes over there. And he's like, well, I'll put my hero over there, and kind of build up a force.
Yeah. And in the starter box, only the rats get a hero because they don't have any heroes in the Mice and Mystics box.
Right.
But all those Mice and Mystics heroes count as mouse heroes.
Right.
So there's all kinds of options.
Exactly right. So you're trying to, and how much you're committing to that means anybody on a mission can't do other things during the actual activation phase, like attack guys from the tree or defend the nest or whatever. So you are committing guys to that. And so you're kind of thinking, well, Craig's probably not running a decoy mission now if he's committing that many guys to the mission.
Right. And the reason that you're going to send a decoy mission is because if you have to put that card out in the middle of the field now, and if any enemy bird flies over that mission card, they can do a swoop attack and attack your guys that are out there on the mission.
Right.
Unless it's a decoy.
Right.
So you might want to put that out. Now, I just want to say one thing, because there's one thing that was very confusing to me, and we did it wrong twice, and then I figured it out, is both the intercept mission where you're doing a ground attack on the other guy's mission and the patrol mission where you're doing a missile attack on the other guy's birds. You don't actually use their stats that say how many attacks they have. You only get 1 attack per normal infantry guy. And then you get 3 attacks per large infantry model.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the mice, when they are shooting their bows normally, they get 3 dice. But when they're doing a patrol mission, they only get 1 die per mouse in that mission.
Right.
So that was key, because we didn't do that one time, and Reese was just killing birds in one shot. I was like, wow, that can't be right. That's why.
And what you want to do is try to foil the missions when you can to avoid things like that. So that's the mission. So at this point in the game, though, you're not resolving it. You're just locking the missions into the middle of the table,
and choosing how many
guys are going to be participating in that mission. Does that make sense, Ken?
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the bluffing. Like, you have a little bluffing mechanic in a war game. That's always
exactly. You're bluffing, and you're imagining now on the ground there's something happening down there. Meanwhile, your birds are getting ready to take off, which takes us to the tilt phase. So in the tilt phase now, this is interesting. So in most of the plotted movement games that we've played, right? If you think about X-Wing, for example, you do have to lock in your maneuvers before the enemy goes, but you don't really know which maneuver the enemy's doing at all. But what's interesting about the tilt phase is, so your birds, when they're going to take off, you tilt them backwards. So everybody knows they're going to take off. But once they're in the air and you get to the tilt phase, you are now going to determine, you can adjust your bird's tilt 1 degree in any direction. So basically when the bird's flying, there's 3 choices. He could be flat, what sort of level, which means he's going to go straight. He can be tilted to the left, or he can be tilted to the right. So at this point, the tilt phase, we're going to go back and forth in initiative order, and Craig's going to tilt one of his birds. I'm going to tilt one of my birds. And so I'm kind of we're telegraphing to each other, I'm probably going to be turning right, or I'm probably going to be turning left. There's an opportunity later to change one tilt back, but it's not guaranteed. And so at this point, you really are kind of committing potentially to where you're going to go. So you're going to do that. So you're locking that in. Now it's time to activate. So again, the game's pretty quick so far. You're going to look at your mission cards, pick a mission, plop some guys on the side, say how many guys are going on the mission, tilt your birds the way you want to go, and you're ready to start activating. So at the beginning of the activation phase, this is a neat mechanic. You can bid for initiative. So each player normally gets to roll 2 dice, and these dice have all these multiple, actually the same dice that are in Mice and Mystics. So if you're familiar with Mice and Mystic dice, you're going to be familiar with these. But they got a bunch of symbols on them. That's very small numbers in the corner. And you're going to roll 2 dice. You're going to add the numbers up. Who's ever got the highest sum is going to have initiative. However, before you roll, you can, remember I mentioned there's that cheese wheel. Any cheese you've accumulated, you can secretly bid some amount of cheese, and each cheese slice you bid, you will lose, but you'll gain one extra die on the initiative roll. So if you really want to go first, you can spend some of your cheese to help lock it in. Of course, there's still a dice roll involved. Yeah. And your opponent will also secretly do the same. So this is one of those places you can use the cheese, right?
Yep.
And I like this because there are moments in the game where you really want to go first, and having an option to deal with that is a really nice thing.
Yep. And the cool thing is you're not even touching your cheese at that point. You're actually rolling however many dice you want, and then you have to pay the cheese after you roll.
Right.
So you can bluff that too.
So we determine who's got initiative, and now we're going to start activating. And basically, you're going to activate in front of you. You have a card for each of your units. So you have a card for, let's say, the mice guard. I think they're called the morning guard, dawn guard,
oak guard.
Oak guard. Thank you. So for the oak guard. And there'll be a number in the corner of that card, like 3. And that's how many guys you can activate with that card, right? So you might have...
activation.
Yeah, per activation. So you might have 6 mouse guard, but when you activate the card, you can only activate 3 of them. So you activate the card.
At a time.
Yeah, and you're going to move you have really 2 choices. You can move them, and then you can attack, or you can move them and then scurry, which is basically move. So you can move twice, or you can move and attack. And how far you can move, how many spaces your ground guys can move, is indicated right on the card. There's a little icon next to a paw print, and that's how many spaces they can go. So it's very simple. You just count how many spaces on the branch. That's how many spaces your guy can move, and then they can attack. Combat is very simple in this game. You're essentially assigned. You've got 2 icons on your cards. One for a sword, which is your melee combat, and you've got one next to a bow, which is your range combat. You're going to roll as many dice as indicated by that stat, and if you're rolling a range attack, you're hoping to see bows on your dice.
Yep.
If you are rolling a melee attack, you're hoping to see swords on your dice. And you count up how many swords or bows you got, and that's how many successes you've got. Your opponent then has got an icon on his card with a shield on it, and that's how many defense dice he gets. He or she rolls that many defense dice. He's hoping to see shields. I subtract the number of shields I rolled from the number of successes you rolled on the attack. However much gets through is how many wounds I take, right?
Yep. And it's very interesting because it's all one kind of die.
Yes.
The box comes, the game comes with 10 of these custom dice, and they're all identical, and they all have bows and swords and sword and shields on them, in addition to numbers in the upper right-hand or upper left-hand corner, and some of them have starbursts. So these dice are being used constantly for multiple uses, and at the same time, they're always the same dice.
That's right.
So it's kind of a cool... You don't have to worry about grabbing different dice and different colored dice against other dice. It's just how many dice are you rolling, how many dice am I rolling, and you're just looking for different things.
Exactly. Now, one of the things we should note about combat rolls is that there's also a piece of cheese on one of the sides of the dice. Yep. And if you ever roll cheese, either on attack or defense, you get a piece of cheese for your cheese wheel. That's the primary way you earn cheese. Now, cheese has some really cool abilities. First of all, we talked about it earlier. You can spend it to gain additional initiative dice to help assure you're going to have initiative. You also, when the cheese wheel fills up, it allows you to bring back dead guys and put them into reserve. So
wounded guys.
Wounded guys, sorry, yes. So a full cheese wheel can bring either back 3 guys from a unit or 1 hero.
Yeah.
Also, when you play with the action cards, okay, which are these cool abilities, and they basically add all kinds of superpowers to your forces, these action cards cost cheese to play. Yeah. So you also have the cheese that mechanic as well. So cheese becomes a very important resource that you're constantly earning and spending and earning and spending. And really, because there's so many different ways you can use it, especially if you have the action cards involved, you're now really making some tough choices. How bad do I want initiative versus how bad do I want to play this card versus how bad do I want to get some of my wounded guys back, right? So there's some tough choices to make on the cheese front. There's never enough cheese when you're a mouse, let's be honest.
No, there isn't. Did you know that cheese is actually poisonous to mice?
I don't believe you.
Yeah.
Really?
It's true. It's not good.
It's actually not poisonous, but it's that swift hit in the back of the head from the metal.
Oh yeah, that does the trick.
Right.
It's not
a
the
common
fall.
misperception. Yeah,
it's not the fall that gets you. It's that sudden stop at the end.
That's right.
Well, the early bird gets the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese.
There you go.
All right. So, anywho, so Ken, is it making sense so far, the whole combat thing?
Yes, absolutely. I like the sort of one dice for everything thing. I think that is nice.
Yeah, it's very elegant.
And the cheese thing, of course, carries over from Mice and Mystics, which I've heard good things about.
Yes.
And it makes good sense. I'm not sure what the action cards do yet. It sounds like their like super moves or something you can save up?
There's all kinds of stuff. Like you can deploy a ballista. There's all kinds of stuff in there.
Whoa,
I mean, it's like
cool.
you name it. Yeah, it's all over the place.
It gives you bonuses, and some of them give you bonuses in combat. Some of them give you like a cool maneuver that you can do.
Yeah, so it's just like, imagine, it's that stuff that gives you the extra little oomph you need. But what's nice about it is some of them are very powerful, but you got to have enough cheese for it. So, and then you're taking away from other places. So it adds a level of depth and strategy to the game if you want it, for more gamery gamers. But if you leave those out completely, the game's still a lot of fun for a more casual quick play, or great with kids because it's a level of complexity you can just remove right from the game. So I really like those cards and how they do that a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can have little ballistas in your tree branches, which is even awesomer. So anyway, so that's the ground forces and attacking. Now, the other thing we should talk about is how the birds work, because this is really a big part of the game. So when you go to move your bird, what you want to do is before you move your bird, you can say, okay, I'm going to make a piloting check right now to change his tilt one step left or right? So this is one more chance to change your tilt. So if all of a sudden, if you declared you're going to fly straight, for example, during the tilt phase, and all of a sudden I realize Craig went a direction I didn't expect or went farther than I expected, I can say, well, geez, I really want to go to the right instead, and I can make a piloting check for a tilt. And how you do that is there's a stat on your pilot card for the piloting stat, and that's the number of dice you're going to roll. You're going to roll that many dice. And Craig mentioned earlier there's a star on some of the dice, a little asterisk, and you're looking for that asterisk to get success for the piloting check. You get that off, you can make an additional tilt right now beyond the tilt you made during the tilt phase. So you adjust your bird's tilt. Now you're going to make a path. And so there's a bunch of these little, they kind of look like straight sticks with a little sort of, almost looks like a bird's foot, a Y at the end in 3 different directions. So there's a straight, a left, and a right. And you're going to choose, and there's these sticks come in different lengths. There's a short version and a long version of each stick. And you can choose both whether you're going to lose the long version, the short version, and how many of these you're going to use. You have to use at least 2, but you can go up to the maximum flight stat of your bird. So your bird card has a maximum number of these things you can put down. So it might be between 2 and 5 for some birds, or 2 and 3, or 2 and 4, or whatever. You do, before you measure anything, you do have to declare how many of these you're going to use and the length. So you might say, I'm going to do 3, long, long, short, right? Or something like that. And the last piece and the first piece are always determined. So the first piece is always a certain length, a certain style, and the last piece is always a certain style, right? So the trick to this is as you put these down, as you put these sticks down, the sticks have 3 different directions, left, straight, and right. And you must choose the direction as you put the next stick down that matches your current tilt. So if you're flying level, all the sticks must be put in a straight line. If you're tilted to the right, all the sticks must be taking the right turn branch. If you're tilted to the left, all the sticks turn to the left, right? So if you're trying to do a shallow turn, you really got to slow down and only use 2 sticks because you got to make a 2-stick turn to the right. Then next turn, adjust your tilt and now go as many sticks as you can straight ahead if that was really your goal. If you want to do a 360, for example, then you're going to want to stay to the right and do a lot more sticks, and you'll eventually come all the way about. Does that sound right, Craig?
Yes, it does.
And Ken, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Is there? I noticed you haven't mentioned tilting up or down. Can you? Is there altitude?
There is no altitude. The only reason you tilt forward or backward is if you land, you tilt back to indicate you're going to take off, and you would sometimes not want to do that because when you're landed, you might want to tilt level so your bird can basically walk around on the branch because the birds also have a walking stat. So when you're on a branch, you might want to be hopping about for whatever reason. Now, there are several things as you fly around the board. There are a few things that can happen. So you could fly over something. So you could fly over a space on a tree. You could fly over a mission card. Remember, because you put mission cards face down in the middle of the board. You could fly over another bird. So things happen when this happens. So if you fly over a mission card or a space on a tree with opponents in it, you can make what's called a swoop attack, which basically means your bird finishes its flight all the way to the end of its flight path. But while you passed over that space, you can choose to make a swoop attack, which is basically you add up the dice that your bird gets for attack plus the rider gets for melee attacks, and you roll all those against the guys in the square, wherever they are. If it's the mission card, then it's against the guys on the sideboard that are on their mission, and if it's a space, it's just who's ever there, and then those guys get to roll defense dice. You allocate your hits, and because roll defense dice and hope they live, right?
Yeah, it's unlike most combat in the game. It's not model to model. It's an attack on an entire space, which is pretty cool.
Which is interesting, right? So that's the main way you can attack missions. So if my bird's flying across the center of the battlefield and I happen to fly over that mission card, that's a great way I can jump in and attack those guys. Maybe I'll kill 2 of them, and as Craig was describing earlier, that's 2 less models that are going to be trying to complete the mission. If you're trying,
it also reveals the mission card.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's also much harder to pull off when you're limited to how many flight paths you can take, as opposed to just use all of them in the box every turn.
Yes, it is. So that's that. Now, the other thing that can happen is you can run into another enemy bird. By the way, if you don't run into anything, if you just fly straight or after you do a swoop attack, if you do a swoop attack, that's all you're going to do. You're going to move and swoop attack, and that's it. If you choose not to swoop attack or to have an opportunity for one, at the end of your movement, you can then fire any range weapons you have. So typically what happens is the birds are flying around and maybe the rider's got a bow or something, they're shooting at them. Now, if, however, you run into another bird, there is a simple version of this and there's a not so simple version of this. So the simple version of it is you simply, both birds take a wound.
Yeah.
And
back off.
Yes, but the much better version of this is the death spiral.
Yeah.
So
cool visual.
This is awesome. So there's actually a death spiral token that has a little notch in it that goes between both birds. So when the birds end on each other, you face the birds off and you put the death spiral token between them so they're like locked in combat. And you can imagine the birds all tangled up, spinning down and down and down towards the ground. And you're going to engage in combat each round, right, Craig? And you're going to attempt to break off.
Only 2 rounds, because if you don't, you both
die.
You both basically die.
So you basically have to break off within 2 rounds or you hit the ground and you're both wounded.
Yeah.
And it's really an awesome scene. It's very visual. You really get it, and you're like, oh my god! And some of the models have special rules that make them really good in death spirals. So the rats in particular, I mean, you kind of imagine death spirals as kind of dirty fighting. So the rats are really good at it, and the mice kind of want to avoid the death spiral a little bit.
Yeah.
Although the one knight on the mice side is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I've taken him down in death spiral.
So what'd you think of the death spiral mechanic, Craig?
I love the death spiral. Basically, you're doing a contested die roll, so you're adding up all of your bird and rider combat dice, and the opponent is adding up all theirs, and you roll off against each other, compare hits. Whoever gets the most hits wins, and the difference in number of hits is the number of wounds that the loser takes. And if there's 1 or more wound taken, you then reverse the direction of both of the birds, so they're facing away from each other, and the game continues and they're no longer locked. If it's a tie, nobody takes damage, but they're locked still, and the combat will continue until the second round where it goes through. And if it's a tie again, you both crash into the ground and die or get wounded and removed from the game. So it's very simple, very fast, but very cool and visual at the same time, because it totally changes the direction your birds are flying and all kinds of cool, wacky stuff.
So does that make sense, Ken?
Yeah, I like that a lot, because that really is like you know, we've all probably seen birds in our front yard or
doing that,
just doing that kind of thing, and it makes you imagine what that is. I think that's cool.
It's excellent.
It's very cool and visual. Now, Russ, what's up with the tail feathers?
Well, right. So another part of the game that I really like is that there are actual tail feather tokens in the game. And what you do is, this is also an optional rule, but you got to play with it because the game's called Tailfeathers. So every time a bird is wounded, whether it's shot, whether it gets involved in a tailspin or whatever, or a death spiral, what you're supposed to do is you pick up one of these tail feathers and you drop it right behind the bird's tail. You literally just drop it. I think it's 1 or 2. I can't remember. There's a number based on the wounds, I think. I forget exactly how that works. But you drop them behind the bird. The feathers then bounce on the table and end up somewhere behind the bird. The feathers are double-sided. So one side is a little darker coloration, one side's a little lighter. And what happens then is the tail feathers stay floating in the air. So basically some feathers got knocked off the bird. And you leave them on the darker side. The next turn you turn them to the lighter side. Then the next turn after that you take them off the table. But while they're floating around, they do cause some problems. So they'll block line of sight. They're small, but they're big enough to be annoying. They'll block line of sight for shooting. And also if a pilot or bird runs into them, they get, I think it's called disoriented.
Or rattled.
Rattled, thank you. Yeah, they get rattled, which start impacting their ability to make piloting checks and other things. So it's just this nice little mechanic. It adds a little bit to the game, but it's kind of great. Again, it adds that visual feel where the birds are getting hit. Now you see the feathers floating around on the table. You just feel like the stuffing's getting knocked out of everybody.
It's very awesome. Cartoony.
It's great. So it's a lot of fun too, and there are all these and what's great too about the game again is a lot of these rules like the Death Spiral, the Tailfeathers, the the power, the activation cards. These are extra rules that you can play without. So again, can keep it very simple for younger players, but you can add that nice fun and extra complexity and flavor for the more experienced gamer, which I really like.
Yeah.
So after that, that's pretty much the main activation phase. You're gonna, but it's interlocking or alternating activation. So I'll activate one of my units. Craig will activate one of his units. We'll go back and forth till everybody's gone. Right.
Yep.
Once that's all done, we go into what's called the final phase. In the final phase, you reinforce. So anybody that's on the reinforcement part of your card, and this usually happens because someone was wounded and you brought them back with cheese or whatever, you can bring them back into your tree. And you resolve any missions. Now, the missions, we're now going to reveal both missions. And the missions all have numbers on the top, which indicates sort of the resolution order. So, for example, the intercept mission, which is the mission designed to stop other missions, goes off first. So that what happens then is anybody who's on that mission attack the guys on the other mission. And you're hoping to kill a few of them to reduce their effectiveness. Because, for example, the mission patrol, everybody surviving in the patrol mission can roll dice, as Craig mentioned earlier, against any bird that's currently flying in the sky. So if I got 4 guys on the patrol mission, I'm going to get 4 dice. But if Craig played an intercept mission and killed 3 of my guys, now I've only got 1 guy attacking a bird, so he's really reduced in my effectiveness.
Yep.
The other mission besides patrol and intercept that's cool is siege. What that basically means is I take all the models that survived from the mission card, and I can now put them in any tree on the board I like. So the idea here is they crawled down my tree, they ran across the grass in the open there, maybe a bird swoop attacked him, maybe he didn't. He got all the way across the other side, and now he's in the branches of another tree. Typically, it's my opponent's tree where his nest is because I'm going to make an attack. So what I get to do now is put all those models in a space that's adjacent to the trunk of the tree, like they just climbed up there. So now Craig's got a bunch of mice in his grill he's got to deal with. And finally, the last type of mission is the rescue mission, where if that mission is successful, and I think at least 2 models have to survive in the mission spot on your card there to do this, you can then bring back one of your birds and riders who was eliminated earlier in the game. So you're basically, you can imagine the bird and the rider have crashed on the ground, and these guys go out, rescue them, patch them up, and they're back in the sky. And the final, there's another kind of mission called Special. That mission has no rules on it, but there are certain missions in the game, certain scenarios that say you must complete a special mission to solve the scenario or do whatever you got to do. So does that make sense, Ken? The whole scenario is kind of how it all comes together with missions and the activation phase and everything?
Yeah, I like that. Are the scenarios linked? I mean, is it a campaign or is it just you pick one out of the book?
They are. You can play it either way. So they can be one-offs, but they all actually do tell a story, and actually your characters can grow in power and abilities and the power cards you have access to as you go up through the campaign. So it actually does tell a story, and you also feel like you're leveling up, which is pretty cool. So let's talk about some of the other stuff. So you can, as I mentioned before, there's a bunch. There's actually like 3 or 4 or 5 downloadable missions now on the Plaid Hat Games website beyond just the missions. I think there's how many scenarios, Craig? Like 9 or 10 in the book?
I
feel like there's a good number.
Yeah.
And there is a story, as Ken asked, and there's a story, and you can level, which is great. There are all those great action cards that really add a lot of depth. And if you do either have a second set yourself or know someone with a second set, you certainly can play 2 sets and play 4 players, and the game totally works. The way the rules are written and designed, it's not like the mouse player goes and the rat player goes. It's the player goes and the player to his left activates a unit and the player to his left activates a unit. So you can go back and forth and play with more players.
The rules are all written as if it's for a multiplayer game.
Yes, and they do a great job.
It's always talking about the player to the first player's left, as Russ said, which, of course, would be the other player in a 2-player game, but it's written so that it works with a 3 or even 4-player game. All
right. So, and I think it's that works really well. And another thing, too, to think about this game is when you play it first and you play like the first scenario, and let's say you go without too many of the optional rules, you might feel like the game's a little too simple. And I really would recommend, if you feel that way, add the rest of the rules and try some of the more in-depth scenarios. I think when you get to some of the later scenarios in the book, there's really a lot going on, and it really becomes quite an interesting adventure, if you will, but also a tactical challenge, so there's really a lot of depth here, despite the very, very simple, straightforward mechanics. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that, Craig? Did you get a chance to look at some of the scenarios? Yeah.
Yeah, I flipped. I mean, it's hard to play. Reese loved the game, but he can't read yet, really. Right. He's reading at a kindergarten level, so he's not going to be reading all the text on the action cards. Mm-hmm.
So we played with just the base game, but I flipped through the other stuff, and yeah, it's some really cool, neat things, and it's like little tricks, like you're backed into a corner, and then flip a card, and sometimes it might make your bird more maneuverable. There's all kinds of cool little get out of the situation scenarios.
Right. So that's the main stuff. So Ken, does it make sense? Did you feel like you got a good feel for the game?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think it's a very interesting system because it's in this new family of games like X-Wing that are sort of board game inspired miniatures games. It's a miniatures game for people who might be intimidated by miniatures games.
Yes,
is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Very good. So let's get our final thoughts here. So, Ken, do you think you can describe the patent pending D6G rating system?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay,
yes.
so here's but you got to do it. I'm going to give you a little. I'm going to test your dramatic reading capabilities.
Okay.
Again. So, Ken, in the style of a mouse who has realized that his beloved mount, his bird, is bleeding out in front of him on the battlefield, please describe the patent pending D6G rating system.
Oh, what have I done? Oh, this. Oh God. Oh, the feet. Oh, the little feet are going. Okay. This, guys. So we've fallen a pretty long way, and I don't think I'm not sure we're gonna make it here, but let's consider we've been in worse situations, and I don't know exactly how to measure just how bad off the oh God, the feathers. Oh, there's feathers feathers everywhere. My God. Anyway, so how bad is it? Well, let's say you had a D6, right? And you rolled the D6. If it were like really great, like it was a great situation and you wanted this situation to happen all the time, it would be like a 2+. In fact, if it were the best situation, like it were, Christmas Day and we had all the birds in the sky and it was just an armada of birds going to bring back Christmas presents from our enemies, it would be like a 2+ with a reroll. But see, this situation is kind of bad, right? So it's like maybe he'll make it, but no, I know you can hear me. Yeah, you're going to make it, okay? But let's say he's not going to make it, okay? You'd give it like a 5+ because that or a 6+ even that's you'd have to roll a 6 on a D6 for anyone to like this situation. And let's face it, that's the situation we're in right now with this bird.
Nice, Ken. I love the little.
Well done.
The little feet twitching was probably the visual I loved the best. So
I hadn't really thought about what a dying bird looks like.
Well, now you have, and we all will have that in our memory forever. So great. So, Craig, why don't you start us off, and we'll let Ken kind of listen to all of our final thoughts, and then kind of give us his rating on his desire to buy this game after hearing all this stuff.
Okay.
So, Craig, what are your feelings on Tailfeathers?
I think it's a really elegant system. I think the theme is great for younger players, but there's the depth, as you said. It scales really well. The basic game is really simple. It's quick. It's actually a really cool, teachable moment. We had Reese doing math. We had Reese doing some very basic reading, looking up the different stats on the cards for himself because it's all icon driven. Mm-hmm. So it's very accessible to younger people. I mean, he's 5.5. I think that would also translate to accessible for new gamers as well. I think this is probably a great gateway game for spouses maybe as well. I like the way that the quality of everything is fantastic. The models are beautiful. I think the visuals that the game presents to your brain while you're playing are fantastic. The death spiral in particular is my personal favorite. I love it. It seems to me to have just the right balance of abstraction and practical table play with the way the birds fly. I love the tilting, and then you can make a pilot check to try to either tilt the other way or tilt even further if you couldn't quite make it. I still 3 games in, I have no clue how to judge the turning radius. So I do find I do find that a little frustrating that you can't combine straight and turns to do any kind of, like, you're either going all straight or you're going all turns, and then your only real control is the number that you choose, which for most birds is not going to be a big deal, because a big range. All the birds that come in the box either have a speed of 2 or 3. Your birds all have to have a minimum of 2 flight paths, so you're going to have either 2 or 3 flight paths, which doesn't give you a lot of options as far as the turning goes. So that to me is a little, I get a little frustrated in that moment. But that's the only real frustrating moment I had, other than Reese throwing 12 dice, re-rolling misses when he was killing my bird with a patrol mission. But that was a mistake, and luckily we found that out before the second time he did it.
Nice.
But yeah, I think it's a great little game. I think it has a lot of there's enough depth here. This is probably a really good game for a gamer to buy who has 1 or 2 young children and a spouse that's willing to play games, but isn't really sure about miniature games, because you can play it in all those scenarios, and with your gamer friends, just bust out the action cards, and especially if you had Mice and Mystics, that gives you the whole range of army building options also, which really busts the whole thing wide open. And the scenarios even allow for you to build up on your on the models as well. So I think it's great. I think I'd probably give it a 4+, only because the theme is, there's not a lot of war gamers that are going to be like, 50% of the war gamers, I think, would look at this and go, I'd rather play spaceships blowing each other up in X-Wing, or warriors fighting it out in Frostgrave or something like that. But I think the game mechanics are very, very solid. So I would say if the theme doesn't turn you off, it's probably a +1. So a 4+, going into it blind. But if the theme doesn't turn you off, if you're like, yeah, I could get behind mice and birds and rats all fighting out in the sky, I think it's definitely a +1, maybe even a +2.
Nice. That's a good rating. Yeah. I think you're there. So I agree with everything you said. I think that one of the things that's really magic about this game is when it is all set up, it's quite a sight to behold. I mean, the trees, the quality
you need to paint these models.
The quality of the components the cards are beautiful card stock. The card board for the trees and the tokens and all the other stuff is beautiful. And when it's all laid out, the board just, especially if you happen to have a mat for either like sort of a blue sky under the trees or maybe some grass that looks far away. Craig and I played it on the GW grass mats, and it looks fantastic. It just jumps right off the table. Yeah. I played it at my house. I have one of those sort of sky blue ocean pieces I put it on top of, so it looks really tall in the trees, and it just really pops, and the whole game looks fantastic. There's a lot of innovation here, both in how the game looks, like just little attentions to detail, like the measuring stick being a twig, just little stuff like that really make it awesome. But also, there's a lot of innovation here. I love the mission system. I think that's just so cool that it just makes you feel like you're in this tall tree and the little guys are scurrying along the ground while you're trying to duke it out in the air. I love the art direction and the style. If you know Mice and Mystics, you know the art's beautiful. There's a lot of story to read. So if you like a lot of background with your games, I know my brother and his family just got addicted to Mice and Mystics for like 2 months straight and played through the whole darn thing, and really loved the story and the whole thing. And so this is the kind of game I think that would appeal to them as well. It doesn't have the co-op feel though. So if you're coming from Mice and Mystics and you're hoping for a co-op game, that's not here. This is really, one-on-one mice fighting rats. But it's a lot of fun. And it looks great, and it is a good gateway game for people. I think, as Craig mentioned, if you think your kids might like, a miniature combat game like this, and you think X-Wing might be too heavy for them, or maybe you just feel like they're more fantasy kids than sci-fi kids. This is a good option. So I would definitely check it out. I think I'm going to go with a 3+ straight up. Because I agree with Craig that the theme might be off-putting to some adults, but I think there's also a certain charm to it that I think will really attract people, and the component quality and the value is really, really quite amazing. So Ken, what do you think after hearing all of that? What do you think, and what do you think your probability is to try to want to acquire this game?
Yeah, I think you guys hit exactly what I was thinking, which is the theme it's actually probably a broader appeal theme, but to this is a game that sounds like a war game for people who might want to get their kids to try playing a miniatures war game, like you said, and if you're already a miniatures wargamer, like me, you might rather play World War II aircraft or
Right.
spaceships or something because that's what you're into. But on the other hand, like my son, who's 11 and loves animals and has read all those Warriors books, which are about cats, like
Right.
and clans and stuff, he would probably love this game if he were interested in playing miniatures games. I don't know that he is, but I think if I ever had a shot with him on that, this would be the game to do it. So I think for that, I would say a 4+. But if you already have Mice and Mystics, or you're already into that and the story and the mouse thing, I think it's easily 3+ with a reroll, maybe 2+, because like you said, you've already got all these heroes in the box that you can add to it. And if you've had Mice and Mystics for any period of time at this point, you've probably played through it, and it's like another way to like breathe life. It might actually reanimate your interest in that,
Yes,
because it'll rekindle your interest in all the stories and the characters and everything. So I think if you have that, it's probably 3+ with a reroll.
Agreed. And also, I would add a +1 to my ratings if your kids are any kind of fans of Redwall or those kinds of stories, because boom, it's that in a box, really.
Right.
As is Mice and Mystics. So
But
great.
I think you're right with adults. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little iffier because of the theme, but I think it's going to be hard pressed for people who are into that to those kind of components. The component quality is really, really good. So, well, Ken, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, especially with a high profile Kickstarter in full swing. So
That's right.
If folks are interested, actually, how do they find out more about Polyversal?
Right. So Polyversal, we have a website, polyversal-game.com. We also have the Kickstarter. If you just search for Polyversal on Kickstarter, I will say running a Kickstarter for 60 days is like being in a 60-day long media interview. Like, it's just people are constantly firing questions at you, which is great, and we welcome them and we want more. But you have to constantly watch the pot while it's boiling.
Right.
But please do, if you have any passing interest in science fiction or miniatures, or certainly if you have 6mm miniatures in your collection, this is something you should take a look at.
Great.
And
So
thank you guys for having me on.
Oh, no problem.
It was a blast having you back.
Yeah, Ken, it's so great to have you. Also, I know you're on Twitter and other places. How can they reach out to find out more about you, Ken?
That's true. I'm at Weekly Wargamer, the worst title for me ever, because at this point it's whenever I can wargame. But yes, at Weekly Wargamer on Twitter, or you can just email me at ken@polyversal-game.com.
Cool. Well, Ken, thank you so much for taking time out of all your busy schedules as well as your lawyerly duties to join us here on the show. We really appreciate it. You are fantastic, and we'd love to have you on in the future. And best of luck with Polyversal and all your efforts there.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
So a bit of an issue, really, and I apologize for what you're about to listen to, as I'm trying to cobble together a studio-esque environment in the pub, which is being torn apart and rebuilt, and yeah, it's a problem. So the sound quality is atrocious. I've doctored it as much as I can, and sadly, I can't do anything else with it right now. So I am sorry. I would not take it personally if you didn't listen, but it is what it is, and I tried to keep it short, and I'm not very good at keeping things short here, so it is what it is. So I apologize, and thank you for those of you who soldier on through. But seriously, it's just a little bit of an editorial on bad guys and how to write realistic bad guys versus what a flat two-dimensional bad guy looks like. And I've talked about that before on the podcast. So that's the Reader's Digest version. So thank you, as always, and I apologize one more time. I feel awful putting this out there, but there you go. All right. Thank you. Good night.
This Shiver Notice is brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon, the men and women who have joined with us to make this podcast possible and help us forge our way into a not-too-horrible future. Today I'd like to thank Arved Azma, Daniel Peter Shaw, Dean Scully, and Nicholas Oxley. Thank you, and all of you, for your additional help. Do you ever notice how often you see bad guys, villains, if you will, who really just don't quite cut it. I'm thinking things like the Dark Eldar in Warhammer 40,000. For those of you who are unaware of who the Dark Eldar are, they're evil because they're just kind of evil. Or how about Chaos Space Marines in Warhammer 40,000? They're evil because they're just evil. And there are other examples from other games and other books and movies, of course. Movies particularly do this a lot, okay? Where the bad guy is kind of sort of extraneous and not really realistic. There's not a lot to go on. There's not a lot that's happening with him or her. And it's just they're bad because they're bad. Action movies in particular, they're bad because they're bad. And I've always had a philosophy, which I think I've spoken of on the show on more than one occasion, and that would be that a bad guy needs to have reasons to be bad, what we would call bad, and the bad guy or bad girl is not being bad in their own mind unless they have a reason to be that way. For example, a bad guy who's been wronged and he's trying to gain revenge will do all sorts of bad things in order to get revenge. But they still know what's going on. The key, the way I kind of think about it, is that a bad guy isn't a bad guy in their own head. If a bad guy is a bad guy in their own head and they're just reveling in being a bad guy, it's boring. It's two-dimensional. As a writer, I try to avoid that at all costs. I try to put as human a face as possible on my bad guys, even when they're not human, and make their motivations understandable and human enough that you get it. You get why they're doing what they're doing, and they're not the bad guys of their own story. Whether or not they might be a hero. That leaves, a lot to be decided. There's a lot of space between a hero and a villain, even in a villain's own mind. The key is, though, that they're not just bad because they're bad. That's just lame, and it's a constant struggle because lots of people, the whole bad because they're bad thing. It's easy, It's easy because there you go. There's the identifier. There's the black hat, right? There's the bad guy. And especially when the writing is from a marketing perspective, you want your bad guys to be clearly bad guys. I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that you can't have a really cool bad guy who's got all kinds of cool motivations, but still is a bad guy. I think you can have a bad guy with a really awesome backstory, and that just makes the bad guy all the cooler. But, and it comes up a lot in story ideas and story meetings and things like that, where you have to talk about, who is the bad guy. And when you give me the bad guy, you kind of know where you're headed, because my bad guys, like I said, I try my best to make it so that they have some semblance of a reasonable backstory. They're not the bad guy of their own story. And something came up very recently, I won't tell you what show or anything, but that made me reflect on this even more. Obviously this came up recently, but then I was watching a TV show where it came up again. And that is the use of sociopaths as bad guys. Now, a sociopath, to give you, the kitchen definition, quick and dirty version, doesn't understand the difference between right and wrong, has no sense of moral right and wrong, and will do whatever they want to do to get what they want. Now, most of them are not, they're not crazy. They don't want to get punished. Not crazy. That just muddied the whole thing there. But so they won't do things that will result in them getting punished, because that's not what they want. But they'll steal, they'll kill if they can get away with it, depending on how deep their problem is. But they don't really make a good bad guy, because you scratch the surface and that's it. That's why they're doing it. And in this particular show that I was watching, a major character, and I think this had to do with, I haven't dug into it, I don't usually research this sort of thing, but I think there was a contract issue at stake, and they had to lose 2 characters, so they kind of decided, well, these are the 2 guys that are leaving, or the guy and the gal, or the gals, or whatever, and so we're going to come up with a storyline that resulted in both of them being gone. And the storyline they came up with was that one was a sociopath and had been a sociopath all along. And of course, a sociopath, unless you know what you're looking for, doesn't leave a lot of a trail behind. So completely plausible, insofar as anything in a fictionalized storyline is plausible, that this guy could have been a sociopath all along, and then it just happened that his sociopathy crossed this other character's path, and there you go. But it was really weird, and it's really weak, because what it allows you to do as a writer is to basically make somebody who wasn't a bad guy instantly a bad guy, because now you're like, ooh, this was going on under the surface all along, which is just kind of lame. And that's why I figured the writing for the show that this happened on is generally really good, and so that's why I'm assuming that it had something to do with contracts. So that was too bad, and it was characters that were really good too. But the key is, your bad guy's got to be believable. There's got to be something going on there. Macbeth is not the bad guy of his life story. That's always what I fall back on, right? And all of this comes from my acting training, where you can't act the bad. If you're acting the bad guy as thinking he's the bad guy, then there's really no depth to that character, and it really kind of just pulls right into writing. And that's sort of been swirling around my head for a couple weeks now, and I thought, as I sit here in the construction zone that was and someday again will be my pub, I thought, you know what? I'm going to talk about bad guys, because nothing else I want to talk about right now is really, bubbling through my head. Then, of course, you've got anti-heroes, but that's a whole other cool topic of some other day. So that's about all I've got to say about that for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
So in honor of Ken being on the show, I thought I'd do my own little mini version of the score here at the end of the episode. I have not the mad skills of Ken, so I'm only going to try one song, but I was really moved this year by the soundtrack from The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt. This is one of the best RPGs I've played in a long time, and the experience was so immersive and due in no small part to the amazing, absolutely astounding and moving soundtrack. The composer, Marcin, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, Marcin, I'm just going to call him Marcin P. Fantastic stuff, really great work. And following here is the main theme, the first track on the CD/album/iTunes selection. The entire soundtrack is available on iTunes at a variable reasonable price. I think it's under like $7. I think it's like $6 or $6.99 maybe for the entire selection of songs. It's like 50 tracks or 48 tracks. All of them are real track length too, 2 to 3 minutes long each. So great selection of music for a very, very affordable price, and really amazing mood music. Tracks for, when you're in the tavern, tracks for when you're in combat, tracks just set tone, and you could easily queue all these up for a great RPG session as well. So check it out. Here's the main theme from Witcher 3, but check out the entire album over on iTunes because there's such a great selection of music there.
No.